Coming to you live from my apartment, it's Rob Has a Podcast. And now here's the guy who's slightly less bland than a rotisserie chicken. I'm Rob Sesternino. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our feedback show here on Monday night after a busy Thanksgiving weekend. Ready to talk some Survivor once again. And we have such a treat for you because I hope you're still hungry for some Survivor, because we have one of the legends of RHAP back with us to talk about what's going on here after episode 9 of Survivor 45. It's our great friend, Dr. Christian Hubicki. Christian, how are you?
Rob, it's wonderful to be back. Thanks so much for having me again. We have so much to talk about that I've been thinking about over the last couple of days. So how are you doing?
Great. So happy to have you back here home for the holidays to talk about where we're at as we head into the final 8 of Survivor 45. So it should be a fun one. I'm doing great. Had a really nice trip to New York over the last couple of days. Got a lot in, but ready to dig back into Survivor with you here tonight.
Yeah, me too. I feel like there's a lot to talk about with this season, and this is the first time I've joined you, I feel like, on the Monday after a show. So I've had more time.
You've done it all this season. You did the know-it-alls with Shannon.
Yeah, now I'm here with you, with you today for the feedback show. So my first feedback show. So I look forward to seeing what the audience has in mind. That's slightly fewer topics for me to improvise on the spot.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll have no shortage of things to break down. And of course, we're here live on Monday nights. If you have questions or comments for Christian, please don't be shy. Go ahead and post them in the chat. Dolores says, do we think this is live for real? I do agree that Dr. Hubicki is a true gold legend.
Well, thank you. That's a very valuable mineral you've equated me to. And yes, it is live. Either that or we are very good at guessing the comments.
We're very good.
It's one of those two things.
Yeah. Okay. So, Christian, what's been going on? What's new?
Oh, well, so it's just we're coming back from Thanksgiving week, and I was traveling out to Emily's family's place across the country. And so a lot of traveling, and we took our dog Fermi with us, which is always a joy, but it's a bit like lugging around a small child who never grows up, through the airport. But it's a bit exhausting, but at the same time, a lot of fun. I got to hang out with her side of the family.
Yeah. Okay. Well, happy to hear you had a nice trip, and looking forward to breaking some of this down here with you. Of course, I got a few housekeeping notes to tell the listeners about. We've got a big live show coming up next week. So I've been traveling so much this fall. This is a quiet week this week. All right. I'll be here in the studio all week long, but Wednesday night next week, we will be in New Orleans, Louisiana. Christian, I hear there's going to be some great guests there.
Yeah. I will certainly be a guest. So I'm curious who these great guests you are talking about are, but I will be there. I'll be one of the guests joining you out in New Orleans, and it'll be great to see you in person.
And that'll be so fun. And first time we're together at a live show since you came and surprised me at the 10-year anniversary party for RHAP. So that'll be really, really fun. If you want to come out and see Christian and a score of other guests, you will want to be there with us in person. Go to robertswebsite.com/events. And first time ever, we did a Black Friday sale for our live show tickets, which is still active through Cyber Monday. Use promo code Black Friday at robertswebsite.com/events. Okay. Christian, why don't we let me get a sense of where are you after this Kendra vote? By the way, my Kendra exit interview is posted. I have the chance to speak with Kendra after the Thanksgiving weekend. Of course, CBS closed for the holiday weekend, so did our Survivor and Amazing Race exit interviews here on Monday.
Yeah, so you just dropped that exit interview. I actually got a chance to watch it right before we got on to air, so I got to see Kendra's reaction to being voted out. After this episode, that my feeling was like, oh boy, we have these old bellows really walking into a potential pagonging for the first time in a while. That was my immediate reaction. But which was a bit of a letdown at the moment because there's a lot of good stuff earlier on in the season. I'm like, I hope it's still exciting. But, pagongings happen. They should happen every once in a while. But I think it's going to be more. I think it's more complicated than that, to be honest. I actually am pretty hopeful that this is just setting the stage for hopefully a really explosive episode coming up. It's my wild, speculation is that this could be a really interesting start to the finale. That's what I'm thinking at the moment.
Okay, talk me through that. What are you seeing?
So I'm looking at this. So first off, my initial concern was that now Reba's going to take charge and it's over. But you have this wild card in Emily. That Emily and that preview, and you can't read too much into the previews for next week, but it really seems like Emily is considering making a move. And the show is starting to dribble out that not everyone is perfectly thrilled to go along with this Reba 4, mostly Emily. Because before that preview, I would have been a little concerned because the Reba core 4, they do seem relatively tight. Little cracks here and there we see from on air. And all the 3 remaining Bellows, it's almost difficult to come up with the 3 that are less likely to work with each other. So I was like, oh, this does not look good. But desperation can bring people together. And I think that there actually is an interesting opening, given the fact that Bruce has an idol and Emily could defect. And that would make for a really interesting escalation toward the finale.
Yeah, it does feel like that if there is some sort of a disaster for the Reba tribe, it does feel like that Emily is a key part of this.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly narratively, from what we're seeing for the story, would be very satisfying. But that's not always how Survivor works out. But there definitely in the previews seems to be some willingness there, and I think maybe today CBS just dropped a 1 minute 1 minute teaser of this upcoming episode, which elaborated on this. It showed Emily with Katurah and Bruce. Katurah and Bruce all together saying, hey, we should really consider working together, or otherwise you guys could be in trouble. And so it looks like at least that's starting to cook a bit. And this would be the time to pull off this maneuver, not only from a power standpoint, but also like a mathematics standpoint. We can get into that as it comes.
Sure. Plenty of mathematics to come. Stay tuned, everybody. But as far as Emily goes, I reviewed the episode again before we came on because it had been a couple of days since I had watched it. And I do feel like that there are a lot of seeds that are planted here in this episode about Emily's season of discontent with working with the Reba tribe. We saw Emily talking with Drew and Austin and said, hey, what about D? Maybe that might be the time to make a move. And both of them gave her a lot of pushback. We also saw then Emily went back to Drew again and said, hey, but why are we voting out Kendra? Wouldn't Jake be the move? And again, they're pushing back. They're not giving her anything that she wants. And we're seeing Emily tell us that she's really regretting that she doesn't have a vote. She feels like that she could do something about the situation.
She seems to be itching to do something, period. And I think that as time slips by, she's seeing her window of opportunity closing. So I really feel that all the pieces are in place for an upheaval. That would be very interesting and satisfying. It might be the most interesting thing that has happened in the season thus far, if it does happen. I mean, to me, the high water mark was even higher than Caleb playing the shot in the dark. Was the Sabaya vote back in episode 3. That was such an interesting vote where there was decision making, there was where there were consequences to the plotting, and finally one of these lost votes really mattered that was to me the most interesting high of the season so far. There's some potential for something pretty close to that upcoming vote, and I'll stop sort of teasing what I think, but I think there's a possibility of a minority vote split, something we haven't seen since 37, to my knowledge. I think that would be a good time to deploy that next episode. Can you talk
me through of what do you mean by a minority vote split?
So I'd say a minority vote split, for those unfamiliar, it's when the people who are potentially in the minority are going to be picked off by a majority or close to it. They split the votes, as opposed to what we were used to seeing, especially circa ever since Cowboy invented Plan Voodoo back in Cook Islands, right? Was that the majority splits the votes, on two people in the minority to flush out an idol and basically be immune to that idol, right? Because the idol gets played. If it hits one or two people you're split on, that's fine. The other person goes home instead. What showed up on our season, I got to credit Nick, and with a great assist from Davey from our season, was an unusual counterpoint to that, which is that if the majority is gunning for a single target, okay, and with the numbers that they have, they can only really gun for a single target, and there is a defector, there is a leak of the information of who gets an idol played on, then of course it can be leaked. Who's the target, who is the target, and an idol can be played on them. That's literally what happened to me. That's how I got a bunch of votes canceled out on me on my season, right? But then the additional tricky part is that the majority might have an idol as well. And once one idol goes flying, high probability all the idols go flying. None have been played so far, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone gets panicked in that situation. So idols go flying. So you have to make sure there is a vote on someone who is not going to be immune. So we split the vote from the minority, sent 2 votes back to the majority. That's what sent the mayor of Slamtown himself home. Yeah. And because Emily would be the leak, she would almost certainly have to know what the plan is. And therefore she can leak it to Bruce. Say, Bruce, and this is my fan fiction, Rob. This is my fan fiction. I hope that happens. I hope the target is Katurah, because then Bruce has to save Katurah. And then you get the confessionals of Katurah thereafter having been saved by Bruce. That's what I hope would be a payoff of her story.
Wow.
And yeah. And then you get Emily, Katurah, Bruce, and Jake in this the Bello and Lulu or Balulu or whatever you want to call that alliance, right? Could split their votes back on the Reba quote unquote majority, not really the majority, but close enough. And so that way, because it's well known that there's one idol floating around. So it's going to be important to make sure that one of those Rebas takes a vote and they are not immune. So that's why I think that the minority vote split could be really well utilized at this vote.
That's interesting. That's probably a little bit more elaborate than the scenario that I had concocted, which was similar to when Suri went out in Heroes versus Villains, where I had thought that if the Reba majority has Katurah and Emily and they feel like that they can trust them, and they do a 3-3 vote split on Bruce and Jake, feeling like, okay, well, even if Bruce plays his idol, we'll go with Jake. And then Emily ends up flipping her vote to vote with Bruce or Jake. And then they also have the correct identity of the person that, or it doesn't even matter, I guess, that they play the votes on one of the people, then they nullify those votes. It would be a 3-2 vote. And then they would be able to send out the other person, conceivably not Austin, who would probably play his idol at the moment that the idol, would he play both the idols, I guess is the question.
So let's break down. So what you're talking about is sort of the foiled majority vote split. This is the sort of thing that happened to poor Steven in Cambodia, where you split the votes and that leaves an opportunity for the minority to kind of shake things out a different way, right? So let's play that out. There are 8 people. That means that they're going to be, the Rebas are going to try to pull in 2 people. One is Emily, maybe Katurah. 3-3 vote on Jake and them. That means only actually 3 Rebas. There only be 3 votes potentially coming in from one of the targets. Now the Rebas would have to be careful to make sure that the solid Rebas are all voting for the same person, I would assume, because then because it matters how you split up the vote. If the defectors are placed in the wrong bucket of votes, then the minority can overtake them with just a raw change of the vote, right? So that could still happen here. So let's say 3 core Rebas are on one side of that 3-3 vote, and you have Katurah and Emily, for argument's sake, along with the 3rd Reba on the second prong of the 3-3 vote. Sorry, we're following it. Basically, 3 core Rebas will be on one of the Balulus, I'll call them, okay? And then you have 4 people firing back. In actuality, you have all 4 of the Balulus back. And yeah, you're right. Then that would potentially take them out without having to even play an idol in that case. Yeah. And that's the other thing. That's an entirely different scenario because no idols would necessarily have been played, and therefore there's no massive idol flush, right?
Yeah. Brooke in the chat. Is anybody else lost? Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So
I'm sorry. I'm
there's
sorry.
a
We'll go
lot of
back. We'll
different
try that
ways
again.
that this could
Yeah.
potentially, if Emily and Katura want to play ball, like there's a lot of different outs that they could potentially go for here, especially considering that Bruce has this idol.
Exactly. That's the best way of putting that. I'm so sorry, whoever that was in the chat. In the future, I'll try to have visual aids. How about that?
Yeah.
That's what we'll try to do. Okay.
Look, and it just goes to speak to how complicated this is. We're all people who have eaten meals today and have gotten some rest. Yes. And now imagine, trying to do this on an empty stomach after not having eaten and, under the stress of Survivor in a period of like 2 hours since the challenge has been lost.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why I've always said, even right after I played the game, it became obvious to me that you don't want to have to reason through these scenarios on the fly. You want to kind of commit a playbook to sort of muscle memory, right? Mm-hmm. Like the example I give is blackjack. Okay. I play a little blackjack. I'm not a card counter, but I enjoy the thrill of losing money at a casino. Little small, tiny amounts of money. I find the cheapest blackjack table on the strip. And I just like to go in and play the most straight on odds that I can. Yeah, Rob, I'm assuming I've missed some underlying joke here to your laughter. Are you just unsurprised by my
I find you like endlessly entertaining.
Okay, well, that's good.
I would love to sit at the $5 blackjack table with you one day.
Oh yeah. That's me at the $5 blackjack table, and I'm not counting cards. You heard that, casino managers? I'm not counting cards. And I am just in my head going by the table. There's a big table that you can look up table what to do when.
Sure.
When the dealer is laying a 6 and you are laying a 7, what do you do, right? And you don't reason out, oh, but if the dealer pulls a 10. Then that's bad. But the dealer pulls a 9, that's good for me. And you work out all the possibilities. You don't have the mental bandwidth to do that. So that's why there is a table. There's a playbook for how you play blackjack. And for me, it's just an exercise.
They'll let you sit there with the card out there. They don't care.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the dealer is not, is doing whatever. But for me, it's an adventure of how well can I memorize a table? It's basically homework. And while money is on the line and time is of the essence, they don't wait long for you to make a bet. And you just kind of go through the motions and you try. And while money is on the line, sort of is raising the stakes. So it's sort of like mentally preparing yourself to not deal with the emotions of money loss. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. So are you saying that Survivor players should commit to memory, sort of like the multiplication chart of how to do all the different vote splits?
100%. And I've come prepared with a few of those today for some of the later topics we might discuss.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. This is new.
Well, normally we talk about 24 hours after the episode. And one of the blessing and curse of us talking several days later is that I was on a 5-hour plane flight with my iPad and the episode downloaded off of Xfinity onto it. So I have pages and pages of iPad notes, and I was and working everything out. So it's been a fun Thanksgiving.
This is incredible.
So we can talk that through. And but the long story short, there are lots of outs here. So it would behoove someone, sit down with a piece of paper saying, hey, if there are 7 people left in the game and and you want to split the votes on an idol, what are the vote splits and blah, 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 and just kind of work it out like you would a blackjack table. Now, a blackjack table is helpful if you have a computer, which you don't have on the island. So that's why you do it at home before you ever go out there.
Okay. All right. Well, would you like to jump into any of that stuff, or you want to start taking some feedback from the listeners?
Well, I think we start taking from the feedback from the listeners. I have a feeling they're going to trip upon some of these subjects. It's like one of those Yu-Gi-Oh! Trap cards they're going to stumble across, and it's going to all of a sudden there's going to be math being thrown at them. So let's go for some questions.
Okay. All right. So, how about, why don't we start with this question from It's Courtney. Would the non-Reba 4 have an easier path turning the tables on the 4 if Bruce did not win immunity, so votes could be split against Bruce and Jake, with the non-Rebas targeting one of the 4? If Bruce wins again, the 4 could continue this streak of saying vote for Jake, but then take someone else out instead. Has Bruce winning immunity actually screwed things up for the Kellys and Kendras of the world?
I thought that was structured like an SAT question for a while, by the way, like the way that was written is like assuming that blah, 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 blah. No, that's great. That's I certainly when the same target is said over and over and over again, there's a certain dynamic to that. And on Survivor. In this case, Jake is being said over and over again, like, oh, the easy target is Jake because Bruce is immune, right? And so that can have a knock-on effect. What that really tends to mean is that the next time people say Jake, people are less likely to just believe it. And I experienced this. I felt this every time Angelina or Allison's name was mentioned on my season. Now it's like, you have to almost mention a different name because no one will believe it's actually going to be the vote this time. That was always those names that were just floated. It's like mentioning me. Like, I'm going to vote Christian again. It's like, okay, are you sure this time? Is it actually going to happen? So there is a dynamic to that where people start disbelieving you. Now, there's the other element of what you talked about, which is the winning of immunity. And that's partly a really important component of this upcoming vote. Let's imagine this upcoming vote on the final 8 goes one of two ways. It can go Rob's way, which is sort of the Suri Fields, heroes versus villains out. And there's sort of my way, which is some kind of crazy idol misplay or minority vote split. We'll see. If there's a minority vote split involved, anytime there's idol is involved, especially, who wins immunity matters a ton. It changes the odds significantly. So anytime there's going to be some weird immunity idol plays or revotes, you desperately want the person with immunity on your side because it can change up the numbers really quick, especially as the numbers get smaller. People on revotes will lose the ability to be voted for, and you can end up in a situation where there is, again, just one target, a la the end of Cambodia, that wonderful final 6 episode we talked about in hour 5.5 of our recap of Cambodia a few years ago, Rob. I'm sure you remember every second of that. But the point being is who is immune matters, especially down to the end, beyond just you not wanting to go home. It changes the entire dynamic for your side.
Yeah. Can we just go back to the vote split for 1 second? Yeah. And so I was talking about a 3-3 vote split where then ultimately if Emily flipped, that could be potentially a problem for the people from the Reba tribe, especially if Bruce plays his idol on the right person, ultimately resulting in a 3-2 vote and somebody from Reba going home. Would the better vote split be for Reba to put their 4 rock solid people on wherever they think the idol isn't going to be, and then have Emily and Katurah also, they'll like basically tell them it's a 3-3 vote, but pile that 4th vote on one specific person so they know at the very least their fail safe is the 4 Rebas are voting together. And so even if Katurah and Emily did flip, then the worst that could happen would be a tie, right? Or I guess actually the vote could get canceled. So
it could get canceled still. I mean, there is a couple of reasons that Reba might want to lie to Emily on this upcoming vote. One of which is what you're talking about, to make sure that they really it's the same reason. It's that Emily can't effectively leak who the real target is. And now there's danger to that because, and I hope I'm not missing your point here, Rob. But there's danger to that in that if once Emily's left out of this vote, she will be gone for sure. But they'd have to make the calculation that, hey, we're at final 8. At that point, it's us core 4 against those 3, and an idol will hopefully be out of the game if we're lucky. And so therefore we have to basically cut ties with Emily.
Yeah.
And that actually, I think, leads to some real strategic tension here, because some of the confessionals we see from Austin are about how much he wants to keep playing these both sides. He and Drew on one side have Emily working with them. On the other side, they've got Dee and Julie, and they want to balance both of them. But there is a danger for balancing both of them too long. It can be tempting because you don't want to give up these options. But they would have to very consciously say, Emily got us this far. We're cutting ties with her. We're going with this 4. And that would circumvent a lot of these scenarios where they could get snookered on a minority vote split or whatever, right? Like basically they would have to, because the 4 of them should vote together. It's
Mhm.
on a target who they think is not immune, and they got to really hope that one of the Balulus does not win immunity.
Yeah. So my question was basically are they better off with if Emily and Katura are with them, are they better
Yes,
off doing a 3-3 vote split or a 4-2 vote
4-2.
split, or
I see.
are they better off? And this is me always like, okay, is there a third way?
Mhm. Worked
The
out for you in the past.
the 4 Reba people, 4 votes on Emily.
Ooh, that's this seems so inspired, Rob. This comes from nowhere in your
They'll
past. This
never see this
idea.
coming.
I mean, that's the Christy Smith vote, right? I
Right.
mean, what it depends is they have to be sure, they have to be aware that Emily, or at least suspect, they have to
Who's
be
going
ready
to
to cut
tell
ties
her?
with her.
Who's going
Obviously,
to tell her
yeah,
from Reba?
no one's gonna tell her. No one's gonna tell her. I mean, the only thing, like the best thing that Reba has going right now is that the 4 of them seem pretty tight from what
Mhm.
we see. Little cracks, it seems like Julie might not be thrilled with how Dean was handling the vote. Little things, but in contrast with Katura, Bruce, and Jake, I mean, they have to really band together. But yeah, back to your point. Your point is really smart. I think that they would have to decide, we are done with Emily. Obviously, they would if they're voting her out, or if they're leaving her out of the vote, they're done with her, right? And I think that that's a very conscious decision that they have to make at this vote that says, this is our path to the end game. We're going to get it down to 7, preferably with getting an idol out of the game. So maybe the way to do it, like this would be my version of the play. Okay. Honestly, the choice of target, I'm cool with your choice. It could be Emily, could be somebody else. But you tell Emily it's somebody, and you expect that she's going to betray you. And if she doesn't, you don't care because
Mhm.
you're voting her out anyway. And so, and that way it maximizes the chance that an idol is played on who the fake target is. You got to get Bruce's idol out of the game. You knock Emily out. Austin sitting on 2. You have the 4 Rebas after that tribal council run around and all try to find the new idol that's hidden after, presumably it gets rehidden after Bruce played it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the move. I mean, you don't have to
Yeah.
worry about these vote splits. I mean, put 4 votes on Emily, 4 votes on Katura, wherever you want to
Yeah.
do it, and then ultimately Bruce flushes his idol, and then basically, I like the idea of taking out Emily because, I mean, if you're the Reba 4 and it's down to Jake, Bruce, and Katura, what am I even worried about here?
I mean, what I like is that one is that by taking out Emily, from what we see in sort of this preview, she's actually could be an organizing force against them.
Yes.
I don't know if they know that. She could be an organizing force. It's difficult to see how Kendra, Bruce, and Katura, Bruce, and Jake all get together under no volition and hatch a counter plan against a Reba 4 without someone like Emily in terms of a number. But she's like a leader of that. They're all going to be discombobulated after that. And it reinforces, I think, an interesting reason we got to this position. Because let's not forget, at the merge or the fake merge, which I want to talk more about at some point in the future, the fake merge, they took out J Maya with the blessing of basically everyone. J Maya, a former Reba. So the Rebas were willing to seemingly sacrifice their own, right? And I think that, and it happened again, like Sifu went home not too long after. I forget exactly the vote breakdown of that.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
from
it was 5-1 on the tribe split.
Yeah. And so Reba seemed perfectly willing to get rid of other Rebas. I think that lulled Bello into a false sense of security that the tribe game was over. They kept saying that. And I think a lot of people were looking at were like screaming at the screens, like, what do you mean?
Yeah. And
They just
Kendra
took out
said today she thought that, okay, well, Austin and Drew are a thing and Dee and Julie are a thing, but what they had underestimated was that the 4 Reba are actually a thing.
Exactly. And that's what there was a big difference between voting out J Maya and Sifu, who were seemingly not part of the core Reba. They were cutting out people that were not their core. Whereas losing Kelly was at their core. You could tell that like it really split up a lot of these folks. I mean, Bruce was tied to Kelly. Kendra was tied to Kelly. I feel like Kelly and Dee are kind of like mirror opposites on the Bello Reba side in terms of their social capital and how much people kind of liked and respected them. That's how I kind of feel. So my point being is that that while they only one Bello got clipped at that Kelly vote, it was such a core Bello that got clipped that left this very shattered Bello as opposed to a very core united Reba.
Okay. All right. Back to if Bruce winning immunity, has this screwed up anything? I think it's actually Bruce being immune for these two votes, I think has kind of opened Bruce's eyes a little bit, especially after that Kelly vote where he's like, oh, it would have been me if I didn't win immunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that opened up his eyes. It's possible because he's immune and he's, for some reason, I don't fully understand why, he's always this target people float. It's like, we got to get Bruce. What can we get Bruce? Like people from his own tribe seem to be saying that a lot. And so, and because he's still available, he's like a weird kind of shield. And they're like, oh, Bruce is still there. Oh my God, Bruce, we got to get rid of Bruce. And then it's easy to miss that some other bigger move is happening other than Bruce. So that's the way I would agree with our commenter that it might have screwed it up. But I'll tell you, I think the fact that most people in this game don't get an opportunity to be blindsided once and get away with it and live to tell the tale. And he was blindsided in terms of the vote and has an opportunity to actually correct and perhaps the people who are willing to work with him at this upcoming vote. We'll see.
Okay, let's take a question. Our friend Brando Meyer had a question.
Oh.
How quickly, Christian, could one of your robots solve the math algorithm challenge?
Oh, well, Brando, that's a wonderful question. And, I'm assuming this is the Brando. So Brando, thank you for watching.
No catfishing going on.
No, we don't want any of that. No, it's great. Thanks for watching, Brando. No, great work on that first immunity challenge puzzle. Good job. And so how quickly can a robot solve that puzzle? Now, I'm glad you brought out the puzzle because I think it's a math puzzle. So of course I was intrigued. And I saw a lot of questions in your on your tweet asking for questions about this math puzzle and how hard it was. And the answer is that it's not that hard if you have a lot of time, which didn't seem like they did. And I took the episode, I stopped it down. I was really curious, how much time does it take to solve? Do they have to solve that puzzle? And I was like, I paused and I looked at the instructions. It didn't say how long they would have. I'm like, oh, they don't say how long. I went and looked at the hourglass. I paused in the hourglass. I did some dimensional analysis to try to figure how big it was and tried to find similar models online. And then, but I was frustrated. I couldn't figure it out. And I texted Gabby, our good friend, Gabby Pascuzzi. It's like, I don't know how to figure out how long they had to solve that puzzle. And she said, it was 3 minutes. They said in the episode.
Yeah.
Like, oh. I went and checked and it was right. It was 3 minutes. So 3 minutes is all they had. And Rob was getting ready to shatter my world and let me know. But I was aware that seems really short. That's a really short period of time. A computer can crank through it fast, but to get it to a person to crank through it fast is actually pretty tricky. But there are some cool tricks.
Yeah. Okay. What kind of tricks per se?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So first off here, let's see if you can see here. I'm going to switch over to my iPad view. Can people see my iPad right here?
So we're going to switch to have Christian in the bigger box here. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
See. So yeah, let's see. You see my iPad? People can see that? Oh, good. They can see that.
Yes.
Good. Fantastic. So yes. So this is a really interesting.
We're in uncharted territory, by the way, in the podcast. Nobody has ever gone to iPad view on the podcast before. So if you're listening to the podcast, you're going to want to check out, jump into the video at some point if you want to see this.
Yeah. And for those who are listening to audio and are watching and are driving to work, please do not switch to video view, and I'll attempt to narrate for you. Okay. But once you're back at work, feel free to procrastinate your job to watch this. So for those who recall, the puzzle was one where you had numbers in descending order, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you had to insert one of three operators. You had this plus, 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 and a minus. You had three pluses and a minus you had to insert into here. And you only had 3 minutes to figure it out. So a lot of people rightfully were inserting these pluses and minuses, try to get it to equal 100. But there are mathematical tricks to help you out, okay? And they basically boil down to two things. One, that 100 is an even number. It's an even number. And so what that means is that whether or not two numbers are added together or subtracted together, if only one of them is odd, then the entire result will be odd. So that means you need pairs of odd numbers to be added or subtracted from each other in this. So when you're looking at these four operators, this is called an operator puzzle, by the way. There's a whole field of this in mathematics called operator puzzles, because you put mathematical operators like pluses and minuses in the right spot to get a solution. This one's kind of interesting because it's got digits that will combine and uncombine. That makes it a little bit of a trickier kind of puzzle. But because you have four of these operators, that means there's going to be 5 numbers that they're going to be operating on. So there's going to be a number at the beginning with an operator in the middle, with with a second number, then another operator, all the way out to 5. So there's going to be 5 groups of these numbers. So what I'm doing now is I am circling 5 groups of these numbers here. Okay. And so I've circled the 9, 8 together, the 76 together, the 5 by its lonesome, the 4, the 43 together, and the 21 together. I grouped them up. And I could insert the operators anywhere in these. I'm inserting pluses or minuses in between them, okay? Question is this grouping even possible for a solution? And the answer is no. There is no set of pluses or minuses I could put between these numbers I grouped together that would be the right answer. Why is this? Because 21, which is the last number I've circled, is odd. Number 43 is odd. And the number 5 is odd. So any combination of adding or subtracting these will result in an odd number. And because 100 is even, impossible, right? So the first thing you can do is just come up with a combination of these groups where you have evenly paired odd numbers. And I'll give you an example for an answer. Let's pair 21 together, the number 3 by its lonesome, and then 98, 76, and 54 all together. Now I look at these numbers, and the number 21 is odd, number 3 is odd, and all the other numbers are even. So this is potentially a good grouping that you could do. All those other groupings that don't have these paired up numbers doesn't work, right? And there's one other version that works here. You could put the 7 by its lonesome, and it also works. Okay, and that's the first trick. Is you want to come up with a good grouping, because that grouping we had actually was correct. Okay. Now, where do you put the pluses and minuses? All right. And there's sort of a trick for this. And what you want to avoid is doing as much you want to avoid as much mental math as possible, because that'll waste you time. Okay. So let's go back. I'm going to circle this grouping I had again with the 21, the 3, the 54, the 76, and the 98, all grouped together. I'm going to try to see if any of these will result in 100. And what I'm going to look at is the ones place in the 100, which is the last number in 100, which is 0. That number's got to be a 0. So to prevent me from doing more math than necessary, I'm just going to look at the last number of all of my numbers in the group. That's the 8 of the 98. That's the 6 of the 76, the 4 of the 54, the 3 by its lonesome, and the 1 of the 21. And I can much more quickly add those up. See, 9 plus 6 is 15, plus 4 is 19, plus 3 plus 1, that's equal to 20, okay? I've added up all those, and that ends in currently a 0. If I
Can you say that one more time?
Sure. So the 9, did I get that right? So the 8 plus, so 8, I screwed that up. I'm so sorry, Rob.
Okay, I'm just trying to follow along, and I want to make sure I didn't miss something.
So 8 plus 6 is 14, right? Plus 4 is 18. Plus 3 is 21. Plus 1 is 22, right? Okay. I apologize. It's 22 and not 20. I did it too fast. See, I would have screwed it up, Rando. I'm sorry. All right. So I add up all these numbers to 22, right? So that's if I assume they're all pluses. But one of them is going to be a minus, okay? And so the trick that you want to do if you want to memorize it at home is that you try to find which of these numbers, if subtracted twice, would end in a 0. And because this is 22, if I subtracted 6 twice, that would end in that would give you 22 minus 6 minus 6. It's 10. Okay.
Why are you subtracting twice?
Great question, Rob. The reason is because if one of these is going to be subtracted instead of added, but before I added them all, one of them is going to be, instead of added, subtracted. So it's like it got added an extra time when I didn't want it to, and then I have to subtract it. This is called a parity calculation in operator puzzles. So if we can discuss it offline for people who have questions about it, but that's why. So because the 6 is an example of that and the 1 is an example of that, you can subtract the 1 twice and it ends in 20. Those are two options for the negative sign. So you can have the negative sign in front of the 76 or the negative sign in front of the 21. Both of those should end in 0. Okay. Now we know the correct answer is 98 minus 76 plus 54 plus 3 plus 21. If you work that all out to check your answer, that'll be 100. Okay. If you were to check the other one, which was the minus 21, and you're adding the 76, it'll end in a 0, but it won't be the right answer. Right. So what this does is it lowers the number of possibilities you have to look at and doing all kinds of mental math in order to figure out what happens. And I'll just do this math really quick. Probably screw it up, but this is going to be 174, I believe. Yes. Plus 54 is equal to 228 plus 3, which is 231 minus 21 is equal to 210. So this ends in, so you can't see that. This ends in a 0, but it's wrong, but this one is right. So you went from a ton of possibilities down to just 2 to actually check. Now, it took me a while, more than 3 minutes to explain that, but it's something that if you practice, you could actually hammer out pretty quickly.
It would have been like the first slide puzzle on David versus Goliath.
So anyway, so Rob, I really appreciate you letting me do this math experiment on a podcast with me, because I know that so the audience listening at home, maybe you're all wonderful mental math people and followed all that, but the point being is you got to find properties of the puzzle that are true that allow you to eliminate possibilities. Like there are groupings of numbers that are impossible. Okay, there are groupings of pluses and minuses that are impossible, and you nail it down to as few as possible. And that way, if you have to make a guess at the last minute, either the minus sign is there or the minus sign is there, at least you got a 50-50 shot at it. Okay.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Rob. I appreciate your patience with me.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, Stephen had a great call with this, and no surprise that he had said that really, the logical place to start was with the 98 and the 76, because otherwise all these numbers were going to be way too high in terms of trying to get it down to 100.
That is a good guess. So if you had two options of, the negative sign could be over here, or the negative sign could be over here, it makes sense that it would be over there, right? Now, I did check Stephen's suggestion that I came up with a version where I took 98 and I split up the 7, 0.65. And that, if you do that and then you do a minus sign there and you do pluses down the end, it only gives you 104. So it's actually not that much more. So it's a good guess, but it's still not enough to narrow it down completely.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so I spend a lot of time. I actually had Emily make up a few of these for me to practice to make sure my system worked.
Wow.
Yeah. So I really, this is actually going to be really embarrassing, but I guess I'll show it anyway. Let's see here. But yeah, I was working out this system. Let's see, find it here. Yeah. I can't find my notes on it, but anyway, it's filled with all these different versions of me doing it just to make sure it still worked. But like again, the key 100 is even and ends in a 0. If you use that logically, it can help you narrow down possibilities.
Okay. Incredible.
Anyway, that's OMG iPad notes haul. Is that is that slang? I'm not sure. anyway, that's so, but let's get back to these people who are doing this, right? Clearly these people did not have a chance to derive their own strategy for how to somewhat reliably do this puzzle. Even then it might be dicey. So really it's about trying to maximize your chances when you're guessing. And good job, Austin. That's not easy in 3 minutes. I remember I was kind of doodling around with the system, and I wasn't like really trying really hard. I barely cracked 3 minutes. But I would have to really like motor through in order to do that puzzle. And I also really feel for Emily. I totally understand what she's talking about for Emily Flippin. We have multiple Emilys in this conversation.
Yes.
So financial analyst Emily Flippin, I get it. It's the
you have just to add and subtract one Emily out of this conversation.
Yeah, exactly. You end up with an odd number or even number of Emilys in that case, because they're both odd numbers of Emilys. But the being in a mathematical field does not guarantee that you're good at mental math. She's absolutely right. Some of the imagine a real like theoretical mathematician goes on the show, they might have struggle with this kind of puzzle unless they practice for it. And a lot of times these mathematical jobs aren't about how good you juggle numbers in your head. It's your ability to analyze numbers that you see and be able to make good assumptions and be able to code up computer programs and do good research. That's what matters. Mental math can come to all kinds of people.
Okay. Well, thank you for explaining all that, Christian. Incredible iPad notes haul. OMG.
Thank you. Maybe I'll try to make the next one at least as understandable as that.
Yeah. Can I ask you a little bit about the auction? For many years, you and I have talked about the potential return of the auction on Survivor. And you had talked about how that you, in your marathon immunity challenge win, talked with Jeff about what the circumstances of the auction being gone and what it could be done to bring it back. So I was just curious to know, what was your reaction to seeing the return of the auction?
Yeah. So my reaction, so you're asking my reaction to the return of the auction?
Yes.
Like I was excited and I felt validated. I remember in my exit interview with after I had been voted out, I met with one Josh Wigler for my exit interview, and he only wanted to talk about that challenge. And I talked about how Jeff's reason for he did not want to bring the auction back is because he said people don't want to see people spending hundreds of dollars on a hot dog. One, I feel that was incorrect, and I think Jeff would hopefully agree with me now. The problem was we needed to get advantages out of the auction, and they just needed to drop them. I think I talked to Josh about that, and they can't just let it be predictable too. I mean, like one of the things was that Shireen had gamed the system because the show did the exact same rules for the loved one letters that they did in the previous seasons. Like, why is that the rule? Just don't do that. Don't let them do that. I mean, I know, Rob, you personally know how much Jeff loves people gaming the auction. In the past, I remember. So you had told the story, I think, recently on Survivor Amazon about the about how you tried the price fix, or
we tried to collude to keep the prices down, and Jeff did not like that.
It was a market manipulation. He didn't like that, right?
No,
don't let that. So number one, don't have advantages. Perfect, right? Great. Already a lot more fun. Okay. Number two, don't make it so predictable. That's what's going to happen. So I kind of like the whole sort of like the whole poker chip or whatever it was that ended the auction randomly. I mean, it already was kind of a mystery, but now it's a little bit more of a transparent mystery that this how many items will be offered above a certain amount. I think that's great. I don't think they necessarily needed to have the loser vote at the end. I agree with what I heard Adam Klein was saying. It's like, is that a little bit too much of an incentive to spend all your money? Because for the most part, people spent all their money because they didn't want to lose a vote. And I think go on.
I agree. I think it kind of took the game out of the auction. It was just a matter of then people were trying to get rid of their money. And then once we reached a certain point, it was that everybody just bid all their money because they didn't want to be left holding the bag with the most money at the auction. So people would have rather, had not lost their vote than, go and start bidding for these different auction items.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the auction is not about the upcoming vote and idols. That's not what it's about. It's about fun
Mhm.
and it's about characters, building characters on the show, like and giving you character insight. I mean, we learned how much, like just the moment of Emily calling the fact that it was a margarita on the tray was fun and memorable. It shows that Emily is observant and figured out that there's a drink on that tray. It's probably up to the rim, so it's probably a margarita. That's She notices things. I know that about Emily Flippin now because of that moment, and how people treat their money tells you something about their character too. Are they cautious? Are they overcautious? Are they ambitious or are they reckless with their money? That tells us something. We don't need the vote hanging over our head to reveal that. So it is so close to being excellent. I think the current version of the auction that they have, and so I just like just take away the vote part. It's I feel like, especially for a season that had 90 minutes episodes, which
Mhm.
they did not know at the time, I feel. It would have been great to just have that character adventure of everyone at the auction. That would have been
Now, when you
wonderful.
say they did not know at the time, how do you mean?
Okay, all right. This is me making a lot of assumptions. So the
Yes.
show, I believe, was filmed starting in April and ended in early May. And the writer's strike started right near the end of filming Survivor. And I just assumed the 90-minute episode was due to a writer's strike thing in CBS. I could
No.
be wrong about that.
Well, I think that they maybe had known that the writer's strike was looming, but I believe that they
Oh.
did produce this season knowing that they would be 90-minute
Oh,
episodes.
I didn't know that. I made a lot of
Yes.
false assumptions there. I gotta be
Yes,
careful with
and
that.
so that's
So
why
yeah.
they built some like elaborate things into the show because they knew they were gonna have 90 minutes.
I didn't know that fact that actually,
And
hey, guy,
Davey in the chat says, "Hello.
Davey's
Hey guys."
Davey in the chat. Hey guys, hey Christian, hey guys, hey Davey. More importantly, where's
Mhm.
Davey? He's here. Great to see you,
Mhm.
Davey.
Yeah.
And so it's yeah. I mean, that reveals that actually says I was actually confused by some of the production decisions that they made, like these really long challenges. I'm like, how did they expect to run these in a 60-minute episode? And now it makes sense that they thought they might have 90 minutes. So well, thanks for correcting me, Rob.
Yes. Okay. All right. So when do you think the next auction will be, Christian? Do you think that we will get another auction in Survivor 46? Or do you think that they will put it on the shelf for a little bit?
They, I don't know. They've been in a habit of repeating challenges on the odd even season. Speaking of even and odd numbers,
Right.
they kind of build it into the format. I feel like they'll do it again, especially considering they hadn't done it in so long. Now, what should they do? I think that they should just have a stable, those kinds of staples. Um, I don't mind if there's a little bit of uncertainty with them, but the auction's so fun. If that was
Mhm.
every season, I wouldn't be mad. It's a
Yeah.
fun thing. It's not like, and to be clear, I think it's fun, but it's like, it's fun in sort of like oh, that's a nice thing to happen sort of way. Like I sort of rank it in terms of like reality staples as like, above most things in a given season of Survivor, but below like something like on, I don't know if you ever watched Top Chef, Rob, you ever watched
Mhm.
Top Chef, or is that not what you're like? At every season of Top Chef, they have restaurant wars.
Mhm.
And that is an example. Like every season, they do restaurant wars, which is where they make a fake restaurant, like a pop-up restaurant, and that's so much fun. That's like the most fun staple of a reality TV show. So it's below that, but above most other things. That's where I put it.
Okay. All right. So, Christian, let's go back to some more of our feedback questions. And let's see. How about a question from Josh, who says that how does the constant loss of votes post merge affect how players have been playing versus how they should be playing? I guess specifically, we had it in this episode, something that I felt like I had mixed feelings about, where we had three players lose their votes, but then there was the opportunity for each of these players to regain their votes. And we had a circumstance that we've really never had before, where we were going to a tribal council where there could have been as few as 6 votes, but
Yeah.
as many as 9 votes potentially. And I thought that that was interesting, even though inherently I don't like this idea.
There's interest in it. I would agree, and I think that, but like in terms of not like, what does it affect the gameplay? That's the core question here. And I sort of just zoom out a touch that if you, and like, here's an example of like a physical example that I think that matches with this. Like, I'm imagining I'm crossing a balance beam, a la famously Cerie Fields crossing a balance beam, right? If I'm crossing a balance beam, and I think I'm pretty good at that balance beam, and I might, go across it pretty quickly, right? But if I thought there was going to be some random noise, some random uncertainty, if someone may be throwing dodgeballs at me while I'm on there, I'd go slower. I'd play safer, right? This is actually a concept in control theory called robust control, where that there are things you can do as best as you possibly could, but if there are disturbances, things that can go wrong, you play it safe. Your robot doesn't move as fast. Your robot plays a little tighter. And so the players in these games are going to play, I think, a little tighter when there's all this uncertainty. I mean, when you have vote margins you're not sure about, what are you going to do? You're going to stack the vote. And that's going to, while that on one hand would lessen the probability of there being a nice surprise, blindside, because you got to peel off more votes in order to do that. Some of the best votes, I think, in the history of the show, I'm trying to think of good examples, but were ones where like people thought there was going to be a 5-4 vote, but then one person flipped. John Cochran. John Cochran was a near deadlock vote, and he flipped. And so it adds that uncertainty. So people will tend to play safer. One, maybe ancillarily, secondarily, that might set up more possibilities for idols to be used in a surprising way, because playing safer in this context means stacking votes as opposed to splitting votes. If you're stacking votes, idols are more dangerous. And maybe the show wants that. But I think that it doesn't have quite the effect that I think the show would like, which is that, oh, crazy things can happen. That means maybe something crazy that will happen that helps someone in the bottom. That hasn't been what has happened, I think, even historically, let alone in theory with these twists.
Yeah, I think that there is this desire that, like, okay, we'll put this into the show and it will just create like utter chaos. But I do think that, this has been a point that, you've made and, many others have made about people just like crave certainty and safety. And, for the Rebas to stick together on a vote like this, what other choice did they have?
Exactly, but there is some interest. Like if we are having this uncertainty in the number of votes that are cast, it actually has some strong implications mathematically speaking. Which means, yes, Rob, it's time to go back to the iPad.
Oh, let's go back.
Okay, let's go back to the iPad. Okay, so one thing we have to remind ourselves is that unlike in the old era of Survivor, where you knew roughly how many votes were being cast, you technically have no idea how many votes are being cast at a tribal council. Just from the number of people are in the game. There could be extra votes. There could be 3 lost votes. There could be 0 lost votes. So how do you even know how many votes are in the game? Okay. And for this, we're going to and there actually is information you can get, and it is discerned by how many votes Jeff reads. Okay. And many of you have probably known this from watching the show, is that Jeff always reads every non-plurality vote. What that means is that the person who goes home, okay, they get the plurality, which is the most votes, not necessarily the majority. And every minority vote is read. There's never a hidden vote for someone else as the janky vote, at least that I'm aware of. I think the closest, I think there was one episode in Survivor Guatemala, and I feel like that was an editing choice, where I think they cut out like Dan someone voting for Margaret or something like that. I forget who it was. But anyway, never happens. And so that means that Jeff reads every non-plurality vote. And also the last vote he always reads is the person who goes home. The blank person going home is this, right? So what does that mean? That means there's a certain number of unread votes. We'll call it U. All right. Okay. Once Jeff has read that final vote, we know that the number of unread votes, which are all going to be for the person who went home, is going to be less than the number of person who got the most votes as have been read, minus the second highest number of votes. Okay. So let's say that, the vote came in, 4 votes for Sam Moore, 2 votes for Christian. Okay. That's what it was, what was read. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
From that vote, how many votes are unread? Okay. And you can sort of reason it through. You could try to figure it out. But as I said, have a playbook, have a very simple formula, have a very simple calculation. Okay. So what we would say is that the number of unread votes here is less than this number. So in mathematics, if you're doing a proof, it's called what's called an upper bound. Okay. So it's got to be less than m minus s. The most votes read against the person who went home. Okay, minus the second most. Okay, I'm writing this out on my iPad.
And sometimes
That's the upper
third.
bound.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the second one is the one that's most important. You can ignore everything after that. It actually doesn't matter mathematically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But the vote before that vote that Jeff reads, okay, means that let's go back, let's rewind to that vote just before. At that vote before, there was a possibility that all the remaining votes could have changed the result, leading into a tie or a change of the outcome, right? So that would mean that the number of unread votes, okay,
Mm-hmm.
is now there's going to be one extra vote that hasn't been that has not been read yet because we're the vote before. Okay, we're going to go to the other side of the equation. There's one less vote for the person who got the majority, and then we're subtracting s, and u plus 1 here must be greater than that. Okay, so which means that there was a possibility that it could be overturned with those votes. Otherwise, he wouldn't be reading votes. That's what we call a lower bound. Okay. And so if we actually work out that math, that means u must be greater than or equal to m minus s minus 2. That's just algebra. Okay. From these upper and lower bound, it means that if you take the most number of votes minus the second number of votes, and you subtract 1, that is the possible number of unread votes, and m minus s minus 2 is the other possible number of unread votes. So these are the two possible numbers of unread votes. So it's a quick just exercise. Like if the vote is as read was 4-2-1, okay, the most number of votes read was 4, and then Jeff said that's enough. Christian, you're going home. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Second most was 2. Okay, 4 minus 2, mathematicians will tell you is 2. You can subtract 1 from that, and subtract 2 for that. That tells you there was either 1 or 2 votes unread, 1 or 0 votes unread.
Mm-hmm.
That's the formula. Okay, so that's the formula you can use to determine how many votes are still left in the kitty. Okay, so that's how you derive it as well. Sorry, not everyone wanted a math lesson, but they got it anyway.
Yeah.
So that's one way to do this anyway.
And Emily was able to do this math in her head earlier in the season when she said to Sabaya, hey, I noticed that there was only 4 votes.
Yes, exactly. And I'm glad you mentioned this because this brings to my part B of the lecture, Rob. Okay, because Emily was able to determine this because Sabaya had lost her vote and she said, hey, why were only 2 votes read, right? However, let's fast forward all the way to this vote. Austin had a vote that nobody expected he had, but it wasn't detected. Is that just because no one could notice? No, mathematically, it's impossible to know if Austin had a vote. Okay. And I worked out the math. I'm pretty confident in it. And here's the way that the math works is that if you read the votes and you would expect to have a certain number of votes for the person in the majority. So let's say what happened in this vote? Kendra got how many votes? She got 6 and Jake got 1, correct?
Yes.
But Kendra, actually, the people expected that she would get 5, right? And then Jake, so we'll say Kendra, she got 5 votes, okay? And Jake, he got 1 vote, okay? That's what we were expecting to see if we were Kendra or these other people, right?
Well, not
add those
Kendra,
together.
But
not Kendra. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Jake
Everybody
and
else,
Zabai,
right?
Yeah, Jake and Katura and all those other folks, right? So add those 2 numbers together. 5 plus 1, 6. That number is even. Okay. All right. It turns out if you expect there to be an even number of votes amongst the top 2 people, you can gain a vote. No one will notice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's it. So, and the only way people would ever notice is if it comes down to a 1 vote margin, at which point you're glad you played that vote. So you could actually, so for Austin, this was the perfect crime.
Yeah.
Okay. There's no way it would have been found out unless it was critical to him winning. Right. So it's a perfect lie, right? If we go all the way back to episode 2, this was after when Emily noticed that a vote was missing. People were expecting 4 votes on Brandon and then 0 votes on anyone else because people saw he played the shot in the dark. So 4 plus 0 is 4. That's an even number. But Sabaya, importantly, lost a vote. That was detected and detectable and detected by Emily. So there's actually a really quick acronym called, I call it Jello, Gello. Okay, that you can gain a vote when you expect even votes, and you're okay. And you can lose a vote when you expect odd votes, and you're okay. So there's your acronym. Okay, if you're on Survivor, you don't have to remember, do all the formulas and say, okay, we're expecting a 5-1 vote. That's an even number. So I can gain a vote and no one will notice. Okay. If I were to lose a vote, people could notice. Emily would probably pick that out. So that's how the math works. So,
okay. So I guess what would be the utility of this?
yes.
I guess if I was going to potentially pick up a beware advantage, and there was going to be an odd number of votes total, right? Or is that for the majority?
Sorry. You're saying you pick up a where a vote, so you would lose a vote, right? So that would tell you
losing my vote, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, go on.
Is the even or odd? I'm asking, is it only for the majority vote total, or is it for the total number of votes?
It's for the first and second place together. It's weird. Okay, so if there's like a 1, like if it's like a 4-2-1 vote, ignore that 1. Okay, just add the 4 and the 2. I know, Rob, there's more math than people probably bargained for, but I worked really hard on this, so I made sure.
The problem is that I don't know ahead of time if somebody's going to play the shot in the dark.
Right. And so that's if you don't know the shot in the dark is going to play, then at which point that's a vote out of commission, right? I'll tell you a way that this would have been imagine you had this acronym at your whim on this particular vote. This was my wild play. It was a long plane ride, Ron. So I was thinking through, it's a long plane ride. I was thinking through these options. So we're at this most recent vote that we saw, okay, where Kendra went home. It was actually a 6-1 vote. People thought it was a 5-1. Okay. So, so as a result, Austin gained a vote, but there was some suspicion that Austin was lying or someone was lying, but we didn't know. Okay. So unfortunately for Austin, it was for everyone else, it was a perfect crime by Austin. Undetectable. It was you could gain on an even GE versus of the Jello. Okay. However, let's say you are Jake, and Jake is armed with this mathematical knowledge, okay? And he's trying to win over people like Emily or someone who is worried that someone who would be betrayed if Austin had lied to them. You could actually reveal that someone is lying. How? By throwing a hinky vote out. Let's say Jake threw a vote on, I don't know, Emily, right? And just pretended it was nobody, right? Okay. At which point it's now at this point it's now a 6-1. Sorry, it's now a sorry, what was it was a 6-1. Now it is a
5-1.
5-1. And so people would expect it. It's going to be it was 5-1, but it would actually Jeff would read an extra vote than people would expect. That's the way the math works out. That's how I work this out, by the way. So basically, Emily could detect with her magical Emily financial analyst skills, Jeff read 1 too many votes, just like she figured out in episode 2. Therefore, there was more votes than we expected. And someone like Jake could go up to Emily and say, hey, isn't that odd? Someone's lying about who had an extra vote. Clearly, it wasn't you, unless you voted for yourself, which you can't. You know, you could think it's Mikatura, or maybe it's Austin. That would be a weird way to intuit the fact that all of a sudden there was an extra vote played that people didn't expect. And so again, inside straight draw stuff, but if you wanted to go undetected, use Jello.
Yeah. It would be a little tough for Jake to make that move, considering that he would potentially be the person who would be the second most number of names in the urn. So he would be like really risking it to put a hinky vote on somebody else. in that spot potentially, but I could see where another player might be interested in doing something like that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, so it could be maybe it's Katura. Or, I mean, Katura would be a good choice for that. She'd be like, look, it wasn't me
Or Bruce. Yeah.
or Bruce, because also Katura's. Oh, she lost her vote. She technically couldn't have thrown a hinky vote out, so it couldn't have been her. So Bruce.
Okay.
Maybe twice. Anyway, so.
All right, let me play a voicemail for you that is asking a little bit about things that might be conducive to being interesting television.
Hey, Rob, this is
Sorry.
Will from Sudbury, Massachusetts, with a question for El Ruben Grande himself.
Wow.
What type of puzzles do you like to watch on TV? As I was watching this last episode, watching someone do math wasn't exactly fun,
How dare
but
you?
you could kind of compete along at home as opposed to building a cube or building a pyramid or whatever it is. So what is the best challenge for TV that's both fair to the players, but then also enjoyable to watch? I'm very curious if there's any kind of spatial awareness or spatial reasoning or logic or math that we haven't seen as much that maybe we should instead. I'm still searching for that sweet spot of what's fair to the players and then also really fun to watch on TV. Thanks.
Okay. This is like an Ask Dr. Hubicki question.
Yeah, I guess it is. But I did turn this into a lecture, so this is already kind of Ask Dr. Hubicki-ish already. But so we're in that territory. But that's a great question, and because I agree with him that you want the ability to play at home because that's more immersive. I think Dalton Ross has made this case over the years. Like even the memorization puzzles, right? The identifying puzzles, challenges, right? That's something that whether you're a little kid or you're an adult, you can follow along. Yeah, I agree with him that not everyone is thrilled by a math puzzle and then is going to be occupied on a 5-hour flight and then try to come up with a system for it, right? But so what are other examples? I think here's a perfect one. Remember that Bones puzzle from season 43? That's Sammy, kind of like lateral thinking. Like I think lateral thinking puzzles are a good one for home. And lateral thinking puzzles are basically like the puzzle is in front of you, but the solution's a bit outside of the box, right? And so if those don't recall, Sammy was given 4, again, numbers. So I guess technically it's a math puzzle, but the solution wasn't really so much math as it was people kind of assumed you would move the bones in a certain way to turn one number to another number, when the real answer was to take 2 bones, put them out in front and put a 1 out in front. And all of a sudden the number is 10 times larger, right? So that stuff is great at home. It's similar for the reason why when they put cool hints visually on the screen for people to figure out, such as the one thing I loved this season, the little cipher code on the flags.
Yes.
The flag, perfect. And I think they could have just kept zooming in on those flags and people could be like, that's a little odd, and see if anyone at home kind of figures out and notices. That's the thing that invites people to watch a little closer, right? It actually reminds me of old school Mole episodes. The Mole, they tried to hide clues.
One of your faves, yes.
Yeah, I love the Mole. Those puzzles, those were too ridiculous. Those clues that they put in it, they're a little too ridiculous. But the era of Reddit would have figured them out, but the era of 2001, not so much. So they need to. So I think that's an example. It's not even a puzzle. It's just like have people notice something that's a little odd. I mean, they kind of did this in David versus Goliath in my season. At the merge, they hid in the they said everything you need for the merge is right here, and then you had this picture of the palm tree, and this palm tree on the island, which was kind of prominent, and people on Twitter figured it out before it was revealed in the episode. So like. And what does that encourage? That encourages people to lean in and watch their TV more carefully instead of being, kind of just half absorbing what's being said. And all of a sudden, I imagine people with families, their little kids, they're like maybe watching, like, oh, I saw the thing, I saw the puzzle. I think that's really engaging, and they should do more of that.
Okay. So Lars in the chat says, I wonder if Christian is watching The Devil's Plan.
I am about halfway through the devil's plan, so I don't know what the devil actually did in the end. So, but I am watching the devil's plan. For those who don't know, that's on Netflix, but everyone does know because everyone watches nothing but Netflix.
Nothing but Netflix, right?
Nothing but Netflix. You're the podcast here on the Rob is a Planet.
Really, what I would love to get your take on is also the Squid Game challenge.
Oh, I have to watch that. I'm intrigued to see how that goes. Yeah, the devil's plan. That's basically the Genius. That's a show we've talked about before. I love the Genius, and it has a shockingly little of the math that I was running in front of you right now, which is fine. But in a way, it's simple puzzles and simple games that become very complicated. Okay, when you think about them, and you have people from all walks of life. Like they're all celebrities, minus two of them. Like they're Korean. This is a Korean game show, and the Korean celebrities, all but two of them are applicants for the show. And Emily and I are really enjoying it. Emily's been in the K dramas for many years, so it's unsurprising she would be into a Korean game show. So yeah, we're enjoying it so far. We've got to finish.
Okay. How about a question from Survivor Joshua, who says, can't wait to see you all in New Orleans for the live show. Do you think that the introduction of 90-minute episodes will impact the overall game that's being played? Sort of like how the 39-day Survivor and the 26-day Survivor are essentially two different games. Do you think that the 90-minute episodes has any bearing on the actual people playing the game?
Well, I would have said no before you corrected me and said that they probably knew 90 minutes might be happening. What are the likely ways that it could affect things? One, the challenges seem to be longer and more brutal. I mean, I was timing this episode, in like 18 minutes of the episode was the challenge itself. And so the challenge would be more brutal, and therefore it's going to be harder on these folks. But otherwise, what would be the actual effect on the players? How would that filter down to them? The only thing I mean, where is the material generated differently? I mean, people go off in their interviews. Are those longer now? So that way they can generate more things. But how's that does it affect the game?
Yeah, so I could tell you a couple of the different ways in which, it's affected the actual players. The pre-merge hidden immunity idols involved more steps. So it wasn't necessarily like, okay, I can just go find an idol without a clue and then ultimately pocket it. And then, so I think that all of the pre-merge immunity idols and beware advantages required the use of working together. And I do wonder if maybe that's one of the things that kind of united that Bello 4. That's really one of the first things that we saw them do, was that Drew and Austin needed the help of Julie and Dee earlier on. So I do wonder if for the people that ended up having to do it, it built a little bit more like team camaraderie. For Sabaya, unfortunately, it did not result in her staying in the game, but she did require, Caleb and Sean to help her out with ultimately, and even Brandon helped with finding the clue. So I do think that it helped to, build up a little bit more team unity, the act of finding the idols together. I do think now post-merge, I do think that we are getting into more like multi-tiered challenges that have had like multiple acts to complete them, between the auction, where it wasn't quite an immunity challenge, but there were a lot of different stages. This week, we saw the immunity challenge resulted in there were like different heats and challenges or levels of the challenge. And I do wonder if that might ultimately be something that we see moving forward, where the challenge is, okay, first do this thing and then qualify for the second stage of the challenge, which is down to this many people. So I wonder if maybe it might end up helping players who are better and more adept at the challenges.
So number one, then, so with that information in mind, that means that all of the game mechanics, whatever they do, can be more elaborate or intricate. Things that they might have considered doing in the past because they might have interesting effects on the players, but were too long and complicated, are now on the table. That's an example. But in terms of the actual effect on the players, I think what you said is very interesting. forcing them to work together. Let's take that premise. Let's assume that the way that these idols were hidden got Reba 4 to work together more closely. Okay. Interesting. I like that. I would suggest you don't deploy that at the beginning of the game. You deploy that after a swap. Okay. Then you force the swapped tribes to work together. The thing I don't think Survivor needs to be putting in incentives for the starting tribes to be stronger. I mean, that's, if anything, they fight against that tooth and nail.
Yeah.
And that makes, in my opinion, the tribe swap one of the two most important innovations the game has ever introduced. That and the current hidden immunity idol framework, those two things are the best things because they prevent the big tribe from coming together and picking off the smaller tribe. That's what makes it so important.
Yeah,
so
wouldn't that be interesting of that for the swap tribes, okay? And Survivor, you can have this, okay? We have no idols hidden at the start of the game, or the idols are hidden, but we don't have the clues. We have our swap, and here's our 3 tribes. By the way, here, each tribe, this is the clue to a hidden immunity idol at your beach. And we just give it to them. Just give it to the tribe. Here you go, here you go, here you go. How do they divvy up that information?
I love it. And that forces the swap tribes to work together, that's what you want to encourage, not the starting tribes. Okay. So that's great.
Creates a lot of animosity in those swap tribes.
Yes. I mean, it can create a lot of animosity, and even just the act of, if let's say you bring in someone into the fold on a swap tribe who would be in the minority, that doesn't necessarily mean all those people work together. What that means is that person in the minority now has dirt on the people in the majority, the actionable intelligence. That's important. So I think that's the way I would work it. I think that's one way that I would change it. That could change how the game plays. And so you're talking about how does it affect the players currently as instantiated, that questioner. And now we're saying, how do we use 90 minutes to our advantage by changing the mechanics? Okay. So what can be more complicated that would be usefully complicated? Okay. So I have a suggestion. This kind of brings up another point I wanted to talk about, which was the non-merge, the earn the merge, whatever you want to call it. Okay? The audience calls it mergatory. The show doesn't know what to call it. It's anything interesting. Okay. If you're going to have the mergatory, whatever you call it, it can't just feel like you've merged. Okay. Like all the tribes come together, Kendra is laughing and dancing. It's a celebration, but they're not supposed to be celebrating, right? They're supposed to be on edge because they have not yet made the merge, but they're acting like they did. They need to make it feel like a completely different event than the merge. So here's my suggestion. I was thinking this through, and I want to workshop this with you, Rob. Okay. Instead of sending all tribes to their merge beach, send them to whatever the edge of extinction was. All of them, all 3 jump on a boat and you send them to the edge. Okay. It's not called the edge of extinction. It's just the same beach where it happened. Okay. Visually, very different place. And you don't have all the tribes jump off the boat and go, yeah, you're here. You park all 3 of them on different edges of the beach. Okay. I mean, I've seen that beach. There's plenty of space. And before the tribe gets off the boat, you hand each of those little tribes a note. These are the swap tribes. Okay. And then you basically, on this note, it basically says, you try to set the tone for what's going to happen. It's like, okay, you're going to be on this beach with all these people. You will not have merged, and soon and get to know these fellow players, because you're going to have to make a very important decision coming up. Okay. And so now they come together. There's some tension. It's like a standoff, perhaps. All these swap tribes coming together and sticking together, and so are they being guarded, considering maybe some important political decisions being made? Okay. And this is where you deployed something that I think hasn't been done nearly enough. You have the tribes pick the teams who are going into immunity challenge. That happened this episode, and that did not happen much before that. It rarely happens, right? Something where they have to choose who is going to be competing for immunity. Maybe some people get left out. I don't know. That would add tension to the stakes. So therefore, immediately you have these swap tribes coming in, and it's much more of a standoff, and this fear that you will not get off of this island and make the merge. So it feels completely different. And there are all kinds of ways that you can go into the rules for how you divide up these tribes. maybe you have it so they all have to stand on a mat. And if people are not left on the mat, then they're out or something like that. Or you have to, if there are too many people on the mat, so they have to vote someone off the mat and then they have to go to the other mat. There's all kinds of things you could do that are more complicated with the extra time. That's my pitch, Rob. I'm curious to hear your takes on it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I like the idea of going to the edge of extinction island and really like having it be one more final test before you ultimately get to the merge. I was also thinking, like, what if, okay, you have the earn the merge challenge and the 6 people that they go to the merge feast, okay, they've earned the merge. But what if the other 6 people just have to go to tribal council?
Yeah. I mean, and they're plotting that they do before tribal council. They go back to that edge of extinction beach. So it looks visually like they're not at the merge yet. It just needs to.
It will require a blood sacrifice for you two to make the merge.
Exactly. I was going to use the word sacrifice. That actually be perfect on the note that you hand all to these people. It's like one more will need to be sacrificed before you are at the merge. The only thing you have to worry about with this format is that historically at these votes, they tend to already be easy picks of the person who's already on the outs. So there needs to be some mecanism by which that person can't just
tribal lines. It could be a little bit of an obvious vote. So
you have to be a little careful with that. But like I think there are mechanisms they can put in play to make that more interesting. But visually, they need to do it.
Yeah. So I think that they could do something if they're going to continue to want to do this. I mean, personally, like I don't love the idea. I just feel like that what they should do is go whatever happened from going from 3 tribes to 2 tribes.
The 2 tribes.
You know, instead of doing something that's sort of like cockamamie and contrived, why not just have a swap for a vote or 2, go to 2 tribes, let everybody intermingle a little bit, and then eventually you want to have an actual merge that happens because we merge and then we split them up again. It's not even like they're really merged.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I remember when we talked, I think way back in Survivor 41 now, I was kind of high on the possibility of what this could do. I thought that it might shake up what could have otherwise been a pretty easy pick at the merge. I mean, there's 13 people at these merges, the non-merges these days. That's a huge number. I've always said it's like that you barely get to know everyone, especially when you have like a day. I had 3 days. I talked to Kara like for 45 seconds at a 13-person merge. Like, and I tried to find her, but but it hasn't really worked out that way. It's been another punt each of these times. It was gonna be Caleb, and excitingly, the shot in the dark worked. But then it was the effect of that was J Maya going home, which was another, she's kind of on the outs, consensus boot. And that's what Survivor fears, is a consensus boot. And every once in a while it's fine, but you don't want it to happen all the time.
Okay. All right. Well, this is a good segue into a question from the Colin Show to the big dog Christian. What's your analysis on the shot in the dark as a whole, considering we've just now seen it work efficiently this season? Is there any alternating that you would do to potentially change the odds for the future? Could we get a check-in with you on the state of the shot in the dark?
Okay. So my mind goes in 2 directions when asked this question. One is, what can we do to make the shot in the dark work? And 2, should we have it at all? Like the engineer in me is like, oh, how do we get this thing to work? What do we do? And the TV viewer in me is like, is this really what we want? Even though we had this really exciting Caleb shot in the dark, and it was wonderful. I got to talk to Shannon Gus about it. It was fun.
Yes.
I'm still out on it. And I mean, the effect of what happened with Caleb, it was so fun, but it, in effect, was like a hidden immunity idol. It was like, and it's actually worse than a hidden immunity idol because they just revoted and got rid of someone else they want to get rid of anyway. Like instead of what actually, I mean, like because there were no hinky votes thrown out on somebody else. It's not like they bounced out Drew because of the shot in the dark, right? It's in fact, by the nature of the shot in the dark, the people are going to play the shot in the dark when all the votes are on them, which means that there might be the only vote out. You know, like, in fact, it's happened multiple times. There have been no votes cast against by a person anyway, it's been a fully unanimous vote, I should say. It's happened multiple times now because the person plays the shot in the dark is probably on the outs, right? So the situation in which they save themselves is highly likely to be one where they just revote and vote out someone else anyway.
Okay.
As opposed to an idol where you instantly bop someone out.
All right.
So
may I pitch a tweak to the shot in the dark? Because I've been pretty pro shot in the dark overall, because I feel like that what the shot in the dark, I've always said, what I think it's designed to do, it's not really supposed to save people, but it is designed to sort of create enough paranoia that people do crazy things to avoid the fear of being the person. And I think that what you're saying is accurate of like, if what I'm saying is right, where the point of the shot in the dark is to create paranoia so we don't have just everybody piling the votes on one person and boring tribal councils, which we suspect is the ultimate fear of production, that we have boring episodes and straightforward votes. Let's introduce the shot in the dark so that we don't have just a tribe of 6 telling the person, okay, Christian, it's you tonight, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, oh, shucks. At least we can't tell Christian because he could play his shot in the dark. So we need to keep things interesting. What if there was a mechanism where if you play your shot in the dark and there are no votes, you, as the holder of the shot in the dark, now stands up and says a name.
Says a name. So let's say I played the shot in the dark.
Yes.
No one voted for me.
Nobody voted for you. You played the shot in the dark.
But I have to say a name. So what happens with that name?
That they go home. You get the one.
They go home.
You get the one vote. Okay. If you played the shot in the dark and there's no other votes, so now we are almost incentivizing that another vote gets cast at all of these tribal councils because everybody's like, well, he plays the shot in the dark. All right, then we'll just vote for the next person. But now somebody has to go write that person's name down. So it's not a unanimous vote. And so you have to tip off the next person in line to prevent. And I don't know, I don't know if it's necessarily like you should get to play the shot in the dark and vote also, or how we want to do it. I like that instead of voting, you cast your shot in the dark, but I also feel like that there could be something here of, I have to also build into my strategy something to protect against the shot in the dark.
Yeah, I mean, so you're trying to jack the shot. You're trying to beat what's the opposite of nerfing the shot in the dark? Trying to make it unnerf the shot in the dark, right? To make it more powerful and therefore scarier.
Because all these shot in the dark votes end up being by a vote of 4-0, 5-0, 4. So that the Caleb vote just happened to be it was going to be a 12-0 vote, or 11-0 vote, based off of that Austin didn't play his vote at that tribal council. But it would be, and then it would, imagine if then Caleb got to cast the one vote. I mean, he might have said J. Maya if Caleb got to cast his one vote anyway.
Yeah, so here will be my tweak. So let's tweak on top of this. First off, one of the reasons I don't like the shot in the dark is because it's something you have to constantly be reminded of. Okay, like, oh, by the way, don't forget that Jake doesn't have shot in the dark. It's not even like a trinket you see. Okay, it's a little die. Okay, here's a tweak. Okay, so I like the idea that you vote. Okay, and therefore it's one of the two versions of what you just said. You vote anyway, but we've been locked into this idea that the shot in the dark is something you play at the voting urn. When what you're describing is really kind of like where you're going with this. Kind of like a gut shot idol, right? So how do you visually display something constantly that all these players have? What if on the torch, everyone has this dangling like idol thing on their torch that they take the tribal, okay? And if they want to play the shot in the dark, when it's time to play your hidden immunity idol, you have to go up to your torch, rip it off, hand it to Jeff, saying, I'm playing my shot in the dark.
See, I don't even think it needs to be that. I mean, let's just go back to, the shot in the dark is a dice. Okay. You go cast your vote like normal. And then if Jeff says, does anybody have any advantages or idols? We're like, Jeff, got to do it. Okay. All right. Bring up your shot in the dark. And like we have some kind of like craps table there.
Yeah.
And you throw
It gotta
your
be
dice.
rolled.
Yeah. You roll your dice. And Jeff says, you're safe or not safe. And that's it.
I mean, that's it. I'm fine with I mean, it's literally a dice. That's always my thing, that you should have a way to roll that dice, even though it's just like, you slide it down like a chute and it comes out at the bottom, right? I don't know, that we don't have to like blow on it when Jeff, is, when Jeff is rolling it, right? I just kind of want the visual of like, you're tearing off. This is the one thing you get. You tear it off your torch and you give it to Jeff. It's like you're burning this one thing. And it's something that could be potentially focused on, like, before we go to tribal council, all of our torches are kind of lined up like along. Yeah, go on.
Okay. What if instead of a dice, it's a Plinko chip? Okay. and you go up there, you gotta play the shot in the dark tonight, and you go up and you put it on the thing, and then it goes. Not safe.
Well, you have to really, first off, I would suggest to the folks at Survivor, you got to test those Plinko chip machines. They have non-uniform distributions at the bottom, so you got to be careful. But yes, something visual. What else is random? A roulette wheel?
Visual, yeah, or a wheel. Yeah, I'm just trying to solve for, like, the dice is like a little thing. Nobody can see what's going on there. Jeff has to call it out, and maybe you want that. Maybe you want to have Jeff say, "All right, I can see the dice, and you are not safe." But like the Plinko board is cool. The wheel is fine.
Yeah, I mean especially the thing about the Plinko, if it's something that falls down into a little chute, then production can have a rig up a little flag or flame that goes up when it's like safe, not safe, right? They could do a whole rigmarole. They're good at that. They've had 20 years of rigging up little Rube Goldberg devices out of wood. So that has something but it's got to be something where there's some tension other than Jeff just reading the little thing that says safe, not safe. I think
Plinko board is pretty good.
I gotta say, you're coming to read the Plinko board of doom is here's another thing I would also recommend for the show. They've kind of gotten away from this sort of tribal theming of names. Like, it's the immunity idol and the hidden immunity idol, or the immunity talisman, as we all true fans know from season 1, right? Now it's like the shot in the dark advantage. It doesn't have that theming to it. So like they kind of I feel like they should kind of return a little bit to naming something so it's within the pastiche of the show. Like I even if it's something like I mean, they do this with the art direction. Like, I thought it was so cool when they even the sword, the immunity sword that they had last season. I don't know just how things look. I think they've got to name they got to name something while being culturally tasteful, of course. Name something within you're at a tribal council. You're named after tribes, and it's just like I feel like they gotta theme these things appropriately for the location.
Okay. Let's take another voicemail question. Our old friend Lyndall from Australia has a question for you.
Hi, Rob. Hi, Christian. It's Lyndall from Australia. I wanted to ask you about the reward from this week, and I am putting the word reward in quotation marks. What was going on with that chicken? No side dishes. He didn't give him a potato salad or even cutlery, and they were just pouring over that thing with their filthy fingers because, as we know, if you go to the sanctuary, you're not allowed to clean yourself up first. Even though Jeff is trying to sell the sanctuary as a luxury resort.
Where good things happen.
Yeah, I don't know. Why was there no even gravy? I mean, was that chicken just left over from the auction? Thanks.
Okay. Chris, my question to you is, what's the worst reward on Survivor? The plain rotisserie chicken for 3, or the rancid wrap sandwiches that got served to Dr. Allison and company?
Well, I think the rancid wrap sandwiches, that that I somehow avoided the bad sandwich. I mean, that's got to take the cake. That takes you out of the game, for a good while. I mean, could you imagine we had tribal that night and Allison has to just keep running off to the side of tribal council to relieve herself?
Allison, are you doing yoga?
Oh God. Just there, by the way, there was some just a little bit of intrigue from that season. Allison was convinced that when she was down hurling, that I was having a secret conversation. I forget with who. Like, I think that she thought, but she was convinced there was planning going on that wasn't happening. And she went back and told Mike. I think she said that she thought me and Mike were off plotting, which we were, but not at that time. So I think Mike was panicked that I'd somehow revealed to Allison that in her fever-induced visions of the plotting that it came back to her. So back to this challenge, though. The rotisserie chicken is pretty bad. Here's the thing I'm perplexed by. Does the show want us to think this is good? The way they talk about it, as like it's good. But I'm looking at the production of this. They're highlighting every greasy noise this chicken makes when you touch it. And I swear, some of this, I mean, I'm not a TV production guy, but there are times where I swear they're adding in the weird greasy chicken noises when they don't have to. There's points where Bruce is just tapping a little bit of chicken piece into a little bit of grease and it's going blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what are you doing? What do you want us to feel?
Because you feel like that's not the natural sound. You feel like that's being added in post-production.
I do. So I think that they're adding that in. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe the mics are really, really good. But I think they're adding it in. So are we supposed to think look how gross that is? What are we supposed to be feeling? Because these people are happy, but we're
they're
God, what's
happy.
wrong with these? Yeah, so I don't know what the show wants us to feel. And it's not even a situation where they can't have two good rewards. We're trying to starve them. Then what's stopping you from giving them a knife and fork? It's that they can't eat that. It's so I don't get it. I'm not sure what they're going for with that choice.
If I had to guess what's going on here, because I don't feel like that in the other New Era seasons that we've had really lousy post-merge rewards. We've had pretty normal when I'm trying to remember when they've done this in the past. I'm trying to remember if Lauren and Danny got a reward when they got to this stage. But I think that it probably has to do, if I had to guess, that they just had the auction in the last episode. And I think that I could see them saying hey, we don't want to give them too good of a reward. They just got rice. They just had an auction. They're fine with this being the reward, just a chicken.
Yeah. Knife and fork. That's all I'm saying. I mean, that's it's oh, it's too nice. These people aren't ripping the dark meat off of the breast. But just visually, it's barbaric. It's kind of like that. There was that old challenge where they had to use their teeth to strip which I hate that challenge, and to strip the meat off of that thing.
Listen, I had to do it.
Oh, you had to do it. Oh my God. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's yeah. That's that.
You think you hate hearing about it? You should have been out there.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine how terrible that was. But the point of it is these people are desperate and it's gross. That was a reward. And so I'll stop saying this, but I don't know what they wanted us to feel as an audience and how they even shot it and edited it. It's just, I don't know.
Okay. All right. You want to hear Jeff how he describes it because he can't make it sound unappetizing. He's got to at least sell it to the survivors. Okay. All right. Here we go.
Our jury. In addition, you're playing for a reward.
Okay.
Want to know what you're playing for?
Okay.
Absolutely.
The group that makes it to the final stage. Regardless who wins individual immunity, the three of you will go to the sanctuary where good things happen and enjoy an afternoon of rotisserie chicken.
I like good things. I like good things. I like good things. Good things are good.
Worth playing for?
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe.
All right.
Rotisserie chicken.
Not a rotisserie chicken. An afternoon of rotisserie chicken. That sounds like all you can eat rotisserie chicken.
That does. That sounds like you got a local Fijian restaurateur with a spit who's kind of like rotating it around and drizzling sauce on it, and they give you it sounds anyway. So I think there's some mixed messaging here. Is all I'd say.
Yeah. All right, there you go. All right, so we don't need to go into the deep dive of the sound design of the rotisserie chicken. But Brooke says, exactly, why is the gross sound effect so weird?
Exactly. So I think that in editing, they saw the opportunity to this is more effective as a gross thing than it is as a good thing. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Do you want to hear the chicken sounds?
Are we
gonna
take off
lose
my
some
headphones?
people? Yeah. Okay. All right then. All right, that's fine. Okay. Okay. Let's go and take another question. Okay. And question from Anthony says, what is the pathway for any of the non-Reba members to get to the final 3 and be able to win a jury vote?
The answer is really easy way is you get Emily to flip.
Yeah.
You get them to take out the Rebas, then you voted Emily before the final 4. Therefore, one of them is getting it. Is getting the prize. That's there are 3 of them, and there is a final 3. I think that's the most straightforward way. Because who else? I mean, who else do you think those Bellows feel that they can beat other than each other? That's what I want to know. I mean, it could be an Emily. I don't know what Emily's standing is like. It was interesting to see. Speaking of jury, sort of standing here, seeing Kelly at that coming in at the jury, she did not seem particularly happy that Bruce was immune. I just was watching the reaction. I think she was more frustrated that if she had won immunity, and she's like, I think she said something to the effect of, "That's why I'm here instead of him. He's winning immunities." So I don't know how this jury, all 2 of them at this point, are feeling about the people left in the game. So it's hard for me to know who people like and don't like from a jury perspective. Rob, do you have any reads that you can help enlighten us, the audience?
So I feel like that Bruce is not beloved by the jury. I feel like that Bruce had beef with Caleb and then also with Kelly, and did not have a great relationship with Kendra. Although Kendra did say that she actually got on the same page as Bruce in her exit interview right before she was leaving the game. So I feel like that Bruce is not in a great position. And I feel like that the Bello people are not really going to be beloved. And that's one of these situations where it might end up behooving the Bello people to all go to the end with each other, as opposed to somebody saying and I don't know if Katurah is viewed that way of oh, okay, let's take a Katurah with us instead of your, Drew and Austin. Hey, we can't beat D potentially. Why don't we bring this other person? It's well, now this other person is the spoiler that is going to get a lot of votes from the people that are on the jury who may want to see a fellow Bello end up being the person who wins. I don't know if Jake has that kind of clout with his former tribe, and we know that there is seemingly some animosity with him and Kendra. But I think that if you're Bello, I think that maybe you want to well, they have to vote for one of us if we all sit all Bello or if they're all Reba at the final 3.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. That's what I was saying. I think that Bello should go to the end with the 3 of them. They should stick together and try to fight it out at the end. I think that it makes a lot of sense. Let's kind of look at it through each sort of cohort here. That I think the Bellos are in a similar boat in that way, right? And then you try to maneuver from the final 8 down to the end in a way that you get some respect from the people on the jury. I think for Emily, I think that if I looking at it from where I'm standing, she comes across like I would not want to go to the end with the Rebas. I think the Rebas would feel like they dragged her along. Why would she's here because we allowed her to be here, and so I have a feeling that they might come across that way. So I think it's a really good idea for Emily to flip at this point and to make a positive affirmational case that she shaped the game. I totally think that she should do that, and I also want that to happen just because that would be a really fun episode next week.
And not only would it be a fun episode, but also, I mean, her name is literally Emily Flippin. I mean, Come on. Come on.
Done. It'll be in the history books here. Emily Flippin, and financial analyst Emily Flippin is perfectly branded there.
Yep.
And I think that so for the Rebas, I mean, don't they also want to just go down I think they all feel like they could. Do they all feel like they can beat each other? I think people seem to feel like D is a big
so
threat.
D
at the end.
feels
People
like
D.
the biggest threat to win at the end. She seems
Yes.
like that she is the total package in that she looks the part of the Reba leader. I think that people respect her. She's won immunity challenges. Austin has been somebody who has like collected advantages, but I feel like that people don't necessarily know about everything that he has done. And so maybe he's been like a little bit in the shadows, I think, trying to keep his threat level lower. And so I think he might have some work to do at the final tribal council. Julie said in this episode that she feels like she's at the bottom of the Reba alliance. And I don't know, she said that at the sanctuary with Bruce and Kendra, and maybe she was just like politicking a little bit, but maybe she was speaking from a place of truth. I wonder, Christian, that we've heard a lot of talk, at least in the fandom, about will Drew and Austin potentially vote with Emily and take out D, or even a Julie. But I feel like there hasn't been a lot of talk about, could D and Julie recruit some of the other players to vote out either Drew or Austin? What do you think of that? Because Julie, we've talked about how I feel like I'm at the bottom of Reba. And then Kendra talked about how, like, well, I think that Austin and D, I think that they're a couple. I think they're getting very close. And we see Julie tell us in confessional, I would never write down D's name. D is my person. I want to go to the end with D. So we know that that's kind of off the table. But do you think that D and Julie could potentially vote out one of the Reba guys?
Well, I could think maybe even more tactically about how one might approach this. I mean, what is the one thing that gets D to vote against people? Is she hears that they were floating her name.
Mm-hmm.
I like, what if like Emily floats to like D, D, Drew and Austin were trying to recruit me for a vote against you or something like that. I don't know if D would buy it, but it's the kind of thing that would actually get D to march into action. Now that's more giving the credit to Emily in that case. So but you're more assuming under her own volition would D decide to organize against Drew and Austin. I mean, yeah, I think that totally could happen. I think she's worried about it being too soon. I mean, because right now, I mean, as far as we can tell, that 4 seems pretty comfy being the 4, at least for the moment. Now, that said, it's the person least comfortable with that is Julie, from what we can tell, right? So could you talk about Julie roping in D for it? I guess she could. Is there a possibility that she could just jump on board the Balloos? Like the 4 people on the outside?
I think it would be hard to imagine the scenario where Julie would make a move one without D. I don't know that. So it seems as though that Katora went to Julie with the information about how Kendra was saying D's name. So perhaps that there's a relationship between Julie and Katora, even going back to that split tribal council where they were both on the same side, and Katora didn't vote with Jake. She didn't go with Jake to write down Julie's name. So maybe there is some sort of a relationship there. Of course, they're also both lawyers, even though Mama J may not know about that. So that's a possibility. And we've also seen where Julie has had some kind of a relationship with Bruce. They went on the reward together. That there's like this little bit of like the older players bond, that they're both going deep into these challenges, even though Bruce has bested her. But Mama J, Julie seems to have no love for Jake, who would potentially be a person that she would have to go with. So could she be the person who unites Katora and Bruce?
I could see that happening. I think the reason I was sort of bringing up the Julie and Dee divide, because we saw a bit of that in the episode. There was Julie thinking the vote was going to go one way, and then Dee immediately just took it and ran with it in the other direction toward a Kendra vote, if I recall. I think that's how it was going. And Julie said something to us about, he's like, I wanted it to go this way, and then Dee just took it in a different direction. That's why it's like, that's part of the discontent in my mind too for Julie. It's not just the biting the bottom of the four overall, that it might not be as sweet for Dee with Dee as we might be led to believe. That's what I'm thinking. We are getting little threads. One thing about the 90 minutes, I think they're doing a good job with, is giving us little nuggets of statements that, little breadcrumbs for how things might go. Foreshadowing, you might call it. Also could be red herrings, who knows? But we're getting little tidbits that give us a sense of what the players are thinking about their stage in the game. I like that. So I think that we are getting enough Julie material about her being discontented, if you will, about the four, that something could happen there. I don't know if it means that it's her making the move, or if it's her jumping ship after a move happens. It's like, well, I was on the bottom anyway.
What do you think about the Austin D potential showmance? It's been talked about. It's been hinted. We have not seen it at all. Do you think that this is potentially something that we could see develop here?
Is this is there anything in canon of the show that suggests this, or is this people projecting, saying, oh, because Austin says, hey, we're good friends, I really like her out here, I like talking to her.
So Kendra
so
was the one who first floated it in the episode. She was the person who said, I think that Austin and Dee, I love this for them, I think it's so good, but I think that they are tight. And then I think that some fans have said, okay, look at the way he looks at her. Could there be something going on here?
I wait till there's something in canon from either one of them to pass judgment on that. I mean, not to go too far in this direction. I mean, it's not like this hasn't happened to me, in the season of myself. We don't talk about this much, Rob, and I appreciate you always being kind about this, but a lot of people thought Gabby and I were going to be a thing out there. And, I knew the whole time that I was talking about how Emily and I have been together for 13 years. And a lot of people in the audience came up to this conclusion. So, and it's very frustrating to not really be able to fight back against it. I mean, it's a tough space to be in. I did talk to Dalton Ross about this, I think, during my Q&A with him in the pandemic, that it's kind of, so I would, unless you get something from these two, I would encourage people to withhold judgment. It might work out the way you think. It might not be what you think. You don't know what their lives are.
I do try to be careful with this because, I don't know what anybody's situations are, but it is at least in the, episodes that we are watching, Kendra is at least talking about this as a potential thing. So I do wonder if next we might have the producers asking questions about this type of thing.
Right. If we get that, I mean, then that's something. Then there's something to it, right? I mean, we kind of had the extreme other version of this with the Matt and Franny last season, right? It was no question there. These people were talking about it to the camera, to us, that they wanted something to happen there. So
we heard the producers ask what they said. Franny, you're blushing.
Yep. That's a bold call by the producers. Like there's future survivors out there. You might be tempted. So if you get an awkward question from the producers, okay, you might be tempted to answer it in a way. I think I was clever. If there were questions that I didn't want to answer to producers, I didn't want it to make air the thing I was being asked. I would answer in a way for which there was absolutely no context for what I was saying. So it would have been harder to Frankenbite together a solution, me answering this question. Or you can just flat out refuse the answer, frankly. Just be aware, whatever you say can and will be used against you in the court of Jeff. But keep in mind that they can also pull tricks like that. Like if you're blushing, they will cut the producer asking the question so they get the material that they need. So they're clever. They're clever folks. I mean, yeah, they'll come up with new ways. I like, and just as an example, there's nothing to do with any of these questions, but I remember like when I'm talking about the slide puzzle in the first episode, I'm intentionally rambling about it because I'm like, they can't cut together any coherent sentence from any of this, but I kind of need to get this off my chest. But that was the first time that I'd seen, at least in many seasons, perhaps ever, they did a cross-faded montage of how long I talked. They'll use new tricks. They're clever people.
Okay. Another clever person is Drew. And I would love to get what you make of Drew. I think that Drew has been a little bit of a Survivor Rorschach test of some people have looked at him and said, okay, that he is somebody who is not going to win. Other people are looking at him and says, okay, he will be the winner of the season. What are you seeing when you see Drew?
So when I see Drew, my first impression is that he is a very clear narrator. Like that's like, and I think that what part of the reason that we see him so much is he's very good at giving us clear quotes about what's happening. And often it's about the mechanics of what's going down. And I talked about this with Shannon too. Just here's a very good example. And I'll get to, I'm not trying to dodge your question about whether he'll win or not, but here's an example of what he'll do when he's explaining like for instance, the idol that you would extend its life whenever you sacrifice a vote. I remember very clearly, he's like, oh, you get your idol, it's good for a little bit. But if you sacrifice your vote, he does this move with his hand and he goes, whoop, it goes back further. And you sacrifice your vote again, whoop, it goes back again. That's a good teaching technique. To actually correlate kind of a funny sound to what's being done. And I remember what he did. And it's visual to the audience, even if they're only half paying attention. You know, they're busy making sure the chicken's not being burned, the rotisserie chicken's not being burned in the kitchen, right? While they're watching. Oh, you can kind of get what's going on. That's a very good narration trick and good teaching tool. It makes sense. He probably might be TAing in grad school for all we know. And that might be the trick he uses. Additionally, I also like how, and so maybe we're talking things I like about Drew. Is really what I'm framing this. There's a really great thing early on in the season. I want to say it's in the third episode when I want to say, I forget what he's up to. He's like trying to find the idol with Austin. And he goes up to, he said, I'm about to go up to these people and talk about how much I love tacos as a distraction because I really love tacos. I talk about it all the time. I like that moment. That's a good moment because one, it shows a little bit of Drew's goofy side. You know, oh, he likes tacos, but also shows how he thinks about this is his strategy for distracting people. And it gives you a little picture of what he's like around camp. Great stuff. So I love the way he communicates. The thing I don't know about Drew is what other people think about Drew. I think we'll get a little bit of this in this upcoming episode. I mean, we get a lot of what Drew says about other people. He has a very vivid confessional about Bruce this episode, describing what he sees Bruce.
Many times this season, he has described Bruce, and that has not been in positive fashion.
Right. He's painted such a clear picture of his view of Bruce and the situation that he's in, right? We get that from him. We rarely get what people think about Drew. And I'm trying to think about times where it happened. Maybe when back in the old, when you had Brando v. Drew back at the Swap Tribe, maybe there was a little bit of back and forth what people think of Drew. I can't really remember too much. And I think in the previews, we get a lot of Jake v. Drew, where there might be some open revolt, but you don't see people on the Bello side.
Do you think Jake is talking about Drew? Maybe when he says, "What do you think? You're a gift from God."
I assumed that was true just because of the back and forth. Yeah, I'm glad you're here to do the Boston accent instead of me. I dare not try. And so very clearly, so we may get a bit of this next episode. And we also got Emily just saying, to be fair, that she trusts Austin and Drew. But again, this is part of the reason why it's hard to predict the outcome on a jury, is because rarely do you get a lot of material about what everyone thinks of everybody else. But I have shockingly few, like we haven't gotten anyone being like, I don't like how Drew is running things. We don't even know how people view Drew as being the top of that alliance at all. Like if he is at all, which might be D. In the little preview today, I think that was released, today, people were talking about, oh, who do you think is calling the shots? D? So I think that they think that D might be on top, but not super clear. Yeah,
It's hard for us because he gets so many confessionals that I think that as like this natural narrator, as you mentioned, that I think that in our like twisted survivor brain, I think we say, okay, well, he's in charge of the alliance. He's getting the confessionals.
Yes, and so that's how that's what we know from what people see, and it's kind of like I wish more of the 90 minutes could be used to give us more of this sort of crossfire opinions on people, even ones that might not even be super important. Are we that are we that tight on real estate in the show for airtime that we can't have a few more of those? I think that the 90 minutes, you could have these really great full 90-minute episodes. And then there are episodes I'm kind of a little bit frustrated because I'm like, I don't know why this thing happened still. I don't know why this happened. And they had 90 minutes to tell me.
Yeah.
So
I did think this past episode was of the 9 from this season. I felt like that this was probably the least informative of the 90-minute episodes. I think a lot of it has to do with the long multi-act challenge that we got, and then everybody being divided into these other groups, I guess could have potentially created some chaos, but then ultimately we just saw people like in their groups of 3 and not a ton of time with the tribe as a whole talking about things. So I felt like that this week was probably the worst use of the 90 minutes that we've had over the course of the season.
That's why I'm not a fan of I'm not a fan of challenges that take a lot of airtime.
Yeah,
and I think that like even again, like I was at a long challenge once, and I think the whole thing wall to wall on the screen was like 10 minutes. This was an 18-minute challenge. And it's like and so I don't think they need to be so multi-stage, even when you have multiple outcomes. Like this challenge could become structured so they're always in teams of 3, and you don't eliminate one stage by saying, "Oh, team came in last. Well, guess what? You're losing your vote. Team number 2, you're not in the running for immunity. First team, you get the rotisserie chicken. Aren't you so happy you get the gross chicken noises? And then here's a quick thing for immunity. It doesn't need to take that long. They could have used that time otherwise. So that's what I would suggest.
Going back to Drew at Tribal Council, he referenced the Sword of Damocles. Do you have any thoughts about that metaphor?
So I mean, it's a good metaphor, a very literary metaphor, and I thankfully I had Stephen Fishback to describe it to me on the Survivor Know-It-Alls. I mean, like it's a good metaphor, and you can tell how much Jeff enjoys it when people talk about the show in comparing it to great literature, right? Or any kind of conflict. Like it's a great trick. It's like so good on you, Drew. You know the trick to get Jeff to be like to like, oh, that was a good analogy. I'm going to move on to the next thing. I have nothing else to say to that person, and so you get them to move on. So I mean, I think and to my understanding, I'm not a big literature guy, but it makes sense, in terms of you amp up the stakes over time to the point where the dam breaks, and eventually you are sorted, I believe is the proper way to conjugate that verb.
Okay. All right. So then I want to go from something else that happened in this episode. I want to get your amateur edit reading on this moment from the episode, because I think it was important and I haven't heard a lot of discussion about it. Okay. So after the challenge was over, there were the 3 groups. There was basically the group that won immunity, the group that lost their vote, and then the group that was like the nothing. And so that was Drew and Dee and Jake, and they went back to the beach and they said, okay, well, we don't get to eat a rotisserie chicken and we didn't lose our vote, but we will make a lot of rice. And we saw Drew and Dee, they make a big pot of rice. And while Jake is off doing whatever, they inadvertently, they're so lost in their conversation, seemingly, they eat all of the rice and there's really nothing left for Jake. And so I am asking you, did we see this because we need to fill 90 minutes of the episode? Or do you feel like, is there some kind of rice karma at play where Drew and Dee laughed about eating all of Jake's rice? But do you think that there is something more to this scene?
Well, the amateur edit reader in me, which I proudly claim not to be an edit reader, but if I am going to put that on, it's a hubris edit. It's especially in the fact that they're a part of the Reba Core 4, currently in charge, and narratively would pay off with their downfall, right? Which so if I'm just putting these breadcrumbs together, that needs to. I think that there's a very strong possibility something really upending happens in this upcoming episode. Maybe not necessarily this episode, but I think it's a good candidate for one. So the question would be, do you just put it in there because it's funny? They also cut away to the confessionals of Dee laughing about this. Like it's not just the fact that they included the event; it is how the choice. Filmmaking is a series of choices. People who know how to make film have told me this. Okay, and there are so many things they could decide to do, and often they choose a particular thing to tell a story. And Survivor is no different in that way. And the alternate hypothesis is that it's another red herring. But all things being equal, it really felt like this was to make us, the audience, feel that these people are too comfortable in their power. And eventually it won't work out for them.
I agree. I feel like that for Drew, it was almost like that he seemingly was like so lost in the conversation that he didn't even realize that he ate all of the rice, because he says to Dee, like, oh, wait, did we eat all the rice? What happened? She's like, it's fine. And then she's the one who is laughing, that very happy about this. I do wonder if this could be set up for a Dee downfall more than a Drew downfall.
That I think that is a more accurate, more nuanced read. I think of that. Yeah, that they are equal in that role. I mean, and it could be that Dee is the one who takes the bullet on whatever comes back on this. Maybe that's how
Let me
it works
play this. So here's Jake coming back, and Drew's going to tell him about how they had to throw out the burnt rice.
Oh, no worries.
We did not get some rotisserie chicken, but we got a ton of rice that Jake didn't eat because we ate more than he thinks we ate.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Poor Jake is like, oh, I appreciate the crumbs that you've left for me.
Let's go back and let's go into our Survivor time machines back in history, Rob. I'm trying to come up with an analogous situation. Wasn't it in Survivor Vanuatu?
Yes.
Where the chicken bones came back. Yeah. So the women came back with the chicken bones and gave them to the men. I'm trying to remember.
So I believe what happened, and don't ask me, this isn't This Week in Survivor History, of which women came back with. So that I want to say Amy was involved, but a number of the women, when they went on a reward, they came back and they had chicken wings, and they let the women eat the chicken wings. And then after the women picked the bones clean, that then they said to the men, hey, great news. We brought you these chicken bones for you to suck on. And then the men were like, oh, thank you so much. Oh, the chicken bones. The women had picked the bones clean. I will also say, in Survivor the Amazon, and again, I'm pretty sure this is in the episode and not just something that happened in real life. Do you ever have this of like you don't remember something really happened in the episode or in your season?
Oh, increasingly, Rob. I'm starting to phase into that realm of existence. Yes,
I'm pretty sure this is in the episode. But so Alex and Jenna had brought home a bunch. They stole some cookies from the reward, and Matt and Butch were out fishing, and I believe one of the players was like, "Hey, they're out. Like they'll never know. Let's just eat the cookies." And Alex was like, "No, that's not fair." And then one of the players, I don't remember who, was like, "But they'll never know. We could just eat the cookies."
I think that was definitely in the episode of your season. That was definitely in it. Well, for me, it's always the revenge rice for my season. I don't remember if that ever made air on my season, but that was talked about in the real time. I don't know if the revenge rice happened on my season, Rob. Does that sound familiar to you?
Explain it more.
Okay. So after Angelina was not picked for a reward, at the final 7. I don't remember it super well because that was my boot episode. I don't exactly love rewatching that one.
Yeah.
But at the end,
it sounds familiar.
It sounds familiar that Angelina made so much rice that it was dubbed revenge rice, that she ate so much of it. Like I'm a big eater. I couldn't eat my whole portion of rice. It was so much. But anyway, similarly, I guess on 2 levels, that there is something to people having a bit of a sort of like a bit of a hubris edit in that moment. Because what happened in Vanuatu with the Women's Alliance famously did not go well. And down to the end, you know. So I that is a classic editing trick to make someone look selfish, and therefore you don't sympathize with them, and they feel like they have it coming if they go home. That's a trick that they could do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Christian, then another question that I have for you has to deal with something that I'm hoping that you can explain to me, because, you know, I've been, you know, covering Survivor for quite some time, as you know. But I do feel like that there is a little bit of a hole that's in my knowledge base that is being increasingly exposed as numerous young people have come on to play Survivor, and they increasingly use analogy and metaphor about the Pokemon.
Yes.
This week, they made a reference to that she was evolving like a Charizard.
So the quote, I remember I went back and sort of wrote it down to make sure I got it. It was,
and I was hoping you could help me with this.
Sure, I can help you out. I do have, I'm not a Pokemon expert. I do have a pretty good knowledge of the original 151.
Yes.
And the
I thought since you
also
were an expert in Magic the Gathering.
Well, I do have Pokemon cards from way back when I was a child. I actually have some I actually have some first editions from the original release.
Wow, your prop standing by?
Yeah, if you can see, it's not a prop, it's disorganization. I've been meaning to organize this table. It's like I had to like move Magic the Gathering cards off it. And on this corner, I had this that Pokemon first edition Pokemon cards from 1990, whatever. So I have some knowledge. I'm not a Pokemon Go player. Emily is. I think she's friends with Davey on Pokemon Go, if I recall.
Okay. All right. And let me go ahead let me go ahead and play the quote here. Okay.
Missing votes are going to play a big part tonight.
Yeah, Jeff. We're at a point in the game where like things cross your mind and then you don't know if it's paranoia, but you don't know if it's the truth. And as players, I feel like we're evolving. Like, you know, as a Pokemon, you evolve into like Charizard. I feel like that's what the new era is. It's like an evolution. And now with 3 less volts.
Like you know, Jeff, you know how in Pokemon you evolve into a Charizard? And he's like, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally know about
very
that.
Much so. Very
much my generation. Yeah, I mean, well, I had multiple thoughts. One is that like, so like, this is the new era language, right? The new era changes everything, including the players in it, to think to a higher plane of existence. They go from a Charmeleon to a from a Charmeleon to a Charizard. There, you know, so that is classic Pokemon languages. You know, we had Davey in the chat to give us additional nuance. But additionally, there was more Pokemon talk in a previous episode with one Brando and Brando and Drew talking. And by the way, at first I'm like, they're going on for a long time about Pokemon Go, not the players, but the show is like editing it for a long time. Is this just to make up time? I did find it interesting though that Drew was like, basically he admits he cheats at Pokemon Go, more or less, is what he admitted on the show or something like that. Yeah, so I believe that's what. Yeah, so I didn't know if that is some kind of subtle thing that the producers put in there, and so and that could be a little bit of character building, like that Drew will do what he needs to, while Brando is studious and works hard, but he ultimately played by the rules. Like I have no idea. I'm overexerting the metaphor, but. The other thing I noticed about all the Pokemon rhetoric is that it's all making the show. I am a little surprised by that. I tried to make an Avengers reference, and I was pulled aside by a producer, and they were like, "You can't do that."
Does the Paramount Empire have some rights to Pokemon?
Almost certainly not. Almost certainly not. I mean, one thing I know about Nintendo is that they are very careful in guarding their IP, their intellectual property. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not three-eighths of the remaining cast. I'm not a lawyer. But I don't know what passes for these sorts of things. Like I remember.
Can you explain
Malcolm
to me? All right, so Sam Moore has pulled some sort of like a visual thing.
Yeah.
Okay, can you explain to me what I'm looking at here?
Okay, fair enough. For those at home, Rob has pulled up a picture of 3 Pokemon. One is the Charmander, all the way on the left, which is the smallest, which then evolves into a Charmeleon, which, if I recall, once you reach level 16, Davey can correct me, it will evolve into a Charmeleon. Then after a Charmeleon, it evolves into a Charizard. Now, Charizard, I want to say that happens around level 36. It was a long time ago where I memorized all my Pokemon tables. And it's important because this Charmander, Charmeleon, Charizard, they get stronger from from evolution to evolution. But in addition, once the Charmander evolves into Charmeleon, you'll notice it has giant wings on it. So it actually, I believe, becomes a flying type in addition to a fire type. The fire type is not a surprise given the flame on its tail, which is a problem. I think that it makes Charizard not a particularly good Pokemon to play in competitive matches because both fire type and flying type are weak against rock type attacks, which means you get quadruple damage against a move like Rock Slide, and it's going to kill your Charizard right out of the gate. So that is my read. Again, I'm not a competitive Gen 1 player. I just read a lot of blogs about it.
So what D is saying, the game has evolved from...
It has evolved the players
baby,
who are playing it. From
like when I played
Charmander.
Survivor, it was
you were Charmander. You were the little one on the left. That was you. Okay.
And then when you played Survivor, it was
Charmeleon.
A Charmeleon
in the middle there.
And Survivor now is Charizard.
Right. If you play in a new era game, you will evolve into a Charizard. That's how it works. Yes, because of the sheer rigor and stress forces you to level up to level 36, and I believe and become a Charizard.
Season 36.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah,
that's right. Perfect.
Okay. All right. There you go. All right. Thank you so much for that explanation. Okay. All right. I had one other subject I just wanted to talk about, and I feel like that there's a player we haven't discussed too much, and I think that he's a very interesting player in this season. I'd love to hear from you about where is this going all for Jake. I think that he's had such an interesting ride post-merge. It really looked like it could have been him or Kelly, and it is starting to feel like that he is one of the main characters of the season, but I can't really see a path for him where this is going to go very well. But I would love to talk a little bit about Jake. Christian, is there hope for Jake?
So, I mean, there's always hope, Rob. There's always hope. You're still in the game, as he would say, there's hope. And then laugh about it, right? So what is the likely path for him to win? Because I was listening to your Kendra interview, and she kind of confirmed that the view of Jake around camp was that, he was just kind of doing all kinds of things. You can't really count on him. And that's not a good view to have of you from the jury. So presumably you'd have to correct that somehow, or put yourself up against people who are less likely to get votes. Those are the two things. I imagine it would be hard for the Rebas to vote for Jake. Like, who is sympathetic to Jake in the game still, and also on the jury? I mean, wasn't it Caleb? Caleb was probably sympathetic to Jake.
Caleb is a big Jake guy.
Yeah, and also Mayor Ponderosa. So maybe if someone wanted to like make a case from the jury, I mean, I think Caleb, the sales guy, could be the one to try to make that.
And Kelly may not be anti-Jake. I think that I feel like it's probably more like Jake agnostic, more than like an anti-Jake vote. Yes, she was voting against him, but only out of self-preservation. I think that Bruce, that she felt like was the anchor, but I don't think that she had an issue with Jake. Now, Kendra, it seemed like that Kendra admitted to that there was a tiff between her and Jake.
Yeah, and one thing I pointed out from the chat with when you were talking with the great Gabby Pascuzzi is that he has a authentic regional accent, which tends to make people more charming and trustworthy and authentic seeming, right? And so, I mean, that's got that going for him too. So, like, and the jury's going to have 8 people on it. So you really need 4. Technically, you need 5. You can maybe get away with 4. Like, where do those 4 votes come from for Jake? Let's say it's Caleb. Caleb, you tried to save Caleb. It didn't work out. I can see that. Maybe Caleb takes some of the neutrals and he uses his salesmanship Canadian magic to, I'm not sure if it's a skill Canadians all have by nature, but in order to whip up more Jake votes. And maybe you can see a Kelly, considering you seem to see Kelly bonding with Caleb. They're literally holding hands at tribal council, presumably as a comfort for Kelly. What could he do all he would need to do perhaps is near the end to make a move that the jury would just perceive like, oh, this is Jake actually taking control of his game. Let's say if Jake is part of this Bello plus Lulu, basically the Bello plus Emily resistance, right? And he goes to the end with Bruce and Katura, and he maybe ousts, let's say, Emily as the biggest threat at the end. I'm just throwing that out there as maybe something that happened. He tries to claim credit for that vote, kind of like how maybe I'm misremembering I forget who took credit for the David Wright vote at the Final Four of Millennials versus Gen X. I know that in some questions
multiple people did.
You know what? You're absolutely right. I think Adam ultimately got it, irrespective of what Hannah might have actually done there. But I have no idea. But clearly Adam won unanimously, so he benefited probably from it, right? But he only needs is the jury to believe that it was him, and not Bruce and not Katura that made this big move at the end. And he's got to beat his 2 fellow Bellows. And that might be a doable thing for him if he plays his cards right.
Yeah, I think that he's just in an interesting spot because I kind of feel like that there's not a lot of sentiment to send him out of the game. I feel like that the loudest voice of, hey, let's vote out Jake at this point is probably Julie, who we've seen over these last couple of weeks has the least amount of agency in the Reba 4. Like, it seems like that there are other people who Drew seems much more focused on Bruce. Now D, she was very focused on Kendra. I'm not sure where she's going to want to go next. Maybe she sets her sights on Emily. I feel like that Emily did say she would vote out Jake, but it's only because that she would prefer Jake over Kendra. So it'll be interesting to see where Jake goes next.
Yeah, I agree. I'm interested to see where he goes from this point. I mean, I wouldn't throw money down on him to win just because he's in a minority and it's a tough go, and you have a lot of people saying that they don't see him as reliable. It's hard to see those votes coming. But again, we'll see where it goes, because I think that the one thing could be is he actually gets to the end and the show is telling a story as to why he could deserve to win. He was down and out and he gets to the end, but maybe he doesn't ultimately win. But there needs to be, it could be the counter narrative to the person who actually wins. But I think there's not no path for Jake, at least from what I can tell.
I think one of my favorite storylines on the show is that Jake seems to have no volume control of his voice and says things like is inappropriate in terms of his reactions and responses to things in terms of both volume and then also in front of who he's with, between how he had the reaction at the tribal council a couple of weeks ago. Even Bruce was very, even annoyed with Jake and how he was reacting to still being in the game. He has a very, I went back and watched the episode. He has a very funny reaction to hello, my name is Jake, and I'm still in the game of Survivor. You know, he's having like a big reaction to still being there. And there's sort of like no sort of like read of the room of like, oh my God, I can't believe Kelly got voted out. Like he's just like on cloud 9.
Well, Jake, give him a break, Rob. He is this is his training. He's a theater guy. He needs to project to the back row. He doesn't have to worry about what the actor next to him hears as a volume. It's the person in the cheap seats has got to hear it. So this is, I wouldn't begrudge him, with his lifetime of theater service, blurting out his lines as loud as possible to make sure the critics hear them.
Yeah, I think he's becoming a real fan favorite too. So I think that he's on a fun journey, no matter where it goes from here. Christian, we've been on a journey,
and a good. We'll go to the journey, but like a good underdog too. I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of the audience is endeared to him, but also Emily. And so we'd also be ripe for a potential Emily ascendancy. And that would be a satisfying narrative for the show.
Okay, Christian, what else did you have in your notes that you wanted to talk about today?
Oh, I mean, I think we got a lot of my math out there. I mean, I'll spare you the other formulas I had. I think you've had enough for the formulas today, but let me just say that just in big picture, let's talk just in terms of votes, again, the vote counting. And you're right, Rob, like my Jello acronym might have the minorest of effects on a game. If you remember GELO, like, oh, as remember that. But it is helpful just as a general sentiment to count like that. That's sort of like the offensive way of using the vote count.
Yeah.
What's a way that you can either, deploy or lose a vote in a way where you get the damage done that you want, but also get away with it, right? There's the defensive side. You want to make sure you count the votes appropriately. Okay. And there's, so basically I'd recommend like for any player going to tribal in this new era, count on your fingers who has how many votes. Okay. I mean, I only not say this as a former player, which knowing that sort of like the stress and the feeling of, oh my God, what's happening? You can forget to count a vote. I'll say this as like a clarinet player in an orchestra. And as a clarinet player in the orchestra, you get a lot of great parts. You can make a lot of cool solos, but a lot of the time you might not be playing. You'll be letting the strings, doodle away, and you'll have like 137 measures rest in a movement, right? And I literally would count on my fingers, okay, just to make sure that I'm just not missing anything. I mean, you have a feel for when your entrance is going to be anyway, but just literally on my fingers. So that way you don't have to count on your memory. You're literally walking out of tribal with a 4 and a 2, like that. It's saying, okay, it was 4 votes, 2 votes. Then when you have that, you can take that and go home and count how many votes were cast. And again, there will always be uncertainty now. We know we can use that math we came up with to determine how many votes weren't cast, but it's either gonna be 1 minus or 2 minus that number we came up with. The only time it's not is when it's a close vote. The only time for sure it's a close, it's like if it's a 1 vote margin or a tie. Like when it's close vote, then you know for sure how many votes there are. Otherwise, you don't.
Okay.
So anyway, I'm just pointing this out. I can't even tell you how deep I got into this math, Rob.
I have no doubt. No, I think it's a good thing to keep in your back pocket. Like, I think it should not be I think if this is top of mind for you on Survivor, I think that you are headed to Ponderosa very soon. But I do think that sort of like maybe while you're on the boat, you're headed to Tribal Council. You have like 40 minutes of downtime. Like these are the types of things. Okay, tonight. There should be 5 votes. We should be expecting to see 5 votes. If you don't get what you are expecting to see, something funny is going on, and it's something that you should be aware of, and something good to keep in the background.
Yeah, no, it's for sure. And part of this is just an interesting mathematical exercise for me because it's fun. But like the implications of Jeff, how he reads the votes is actually what he says. That's 4 votes. That's enough. That is a precise mathematical statement that he's making. And also the order in which he reads them, not specifically what vote he reads last, that choice matters. if it were such that for dramatic effect, like we know for dramatic effect, he always reads the person going out, he reads them last. If he didn't do that, if he instead read the Hinky vote last, that actually has implications for the vote count. You actually do precisely know the vote count if he reads the Hinky vote last, as what I worked out in my chart. So it's just like, oh, these little game decisions lead to information of medium consequences. So these little things matter. It's interesting to dive into that. That's all I'll say.
Okay. Well, Christian, this was such a fun one tonight. So glad you had the time to talk this all through. And even though I said that, I thought this was my, the least maybe informative episode of the 9. This was so much to dig into with you.
Oh, thank you. I once I saw all of the math, I was like, okay, all right, I'm got to get the iPad out. And so kudos to your producer, Sam Moore, for helping me debug the tech issues right before I came on here. So they could be subjected, so your audience can be subjected to that. But no, there is a lot to dig into. And I do think that there's a strong possibility of a really exciting episode next time. I'm daring to believe, Rob. I'm daring to believe that this could be a fun one. And I hope as impactful as anything has happened in this season so far.
Okay. All right. Well, we will see on Wednesday night when we are back. And also, while he's not a moderator, he's never asked us for the wrench. The Christian is often in the chat live after the episode, 9:45 p.m. Eastern time, to weigh in. That we will be live on Wednesday night. Zach Wurtenberger. Wurtenberger's equals ratings these days, Christian. That's what the word is on the street. And so Zach Wurtenberger will join me on Wednesday night. Should be very fun to catch up with Zach at 9:45 Eastern to talk about everything that happens in episode 10 of Survivor 45. Then you and I will be together the following week in New Orleans for episode 11. robisawebsite.com/events, promo code Black Friday if you want to be there with us in person. Will you be bringing some sort of a whiteboard with you to New Orleans in case you need to break something down on the fly?
Costs extra, but yes.
Okay. All right. Then on Tuesday night, I will be doing Survivor Q&A for the patrons of Rob as a Podcast. You can call in, ask your questions as we look ahead to episode number 10. Jenny Autumn will join me then, 6 p.m. Eastern, robisawebsite.com/patron for the link to that one of the many perks we have for the patrons of Rob as a Podcast. Christian, what else is coming up for you?
Well, so I mean, fun things are coming up for me. I just want to stop on Zach Wurtenberger for a second here.
Yes,
he is just so effervescently funny.
Game? Yes,
he's so funny to me. I know I'm not the last person to say this, but he's just got such a witty way of going about things. And I watched his video where he broke down. Did you see the video he posted?
Of course.
Oh yeah, everyone did. It was such a delightful video breaking it down. He's got such great timing and a way of, it's just, I love his attitude. And to take a first boot situation and to turn it into such just a breath of fresh air, it really takes some talent on his part. And I do have a little Zach Wurtenberger story I can share. I mean, I hope Zach's okay with me sharing. I guess it's my fault, so I can share it. But like after he released this video, and if you haven't seen it, it's
Dawn of a New Era.
Dawn of a New Era. And what it is Zach is trying to break down who the mystery Survivor 41 cast was going to be before it was postponed due to the pandemic. And because we're slowly getting trickles of these contestants that were going to be on 41, they're kind of popping up on later seasons. And so he's pieced together from a series of hilariously in-depth investigations as to what he's figured out so far. And it's got twists, it's got turns, it's got chills and thrills, it's got everything. And I saw this, and I was like, I have to reach out to Zach. I have to reach out to him. So I sent him a message. And it was to say, Zach, you did really great detective work. I'm really sad to tell you, I have some additional information that's going to throw off some of your math. And I said, you're assuming a certain number of people are on the tribes, but you don't know that I was under consideration to be a captain of Survivor 41. And I explained who all the candidate captains were going to be, to my knowledge, and that this was going to be an unusually large season with 24 new players for the new era. This was about 1,000 words I sent over Twitter DM, and I waited and waited, and Zach was like, I don't know what to say. And I was like, well, none of it's true. So I basically just kind of trolled him, and I think for a good 15 minutes, Zach had a bit of a
You
crisis.
melted his brain, yeah.
I might have melted his brain. I didn't want to let him linger too long like that. I was like, no, that's all a lie. But you did a great video, and I think that Zach remembers that incident all too well. So I'm sorry, Zach, but I thought it was really funny.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean,
so what's going on with me?
Yeah, you're writing elaborate pranks to the Survivor alumni.
Yeah, to the Survivor alumni. That's number one. So I'm
for your
professoring.
own
I am
amusement.
Teaching. Yeah, my own amusement. That's number one. That's the addition. So I'm teaching. I got a pretty big teaching load. But the fun thing is I'm going to be putting my lectures up on YouTube starting next semester. They're already unlisted, so you can find them. But yeah, one of my passions is to teach this course called Optimal Control. It's kind of like these advanced control techniques for robots, and I love to teach it in a way where you don't need very much mathematical background to go into it. And sometimes I'll be in my lecture hall at school. Sometimes I'll be at my whiteboard right here, doing it online and coding along with people. So, and right now it's being offered not just to my university, but to multiple universities to try to spread this material that I find really interesting. So I'm really pleased with that. And otherwise, things are fun right here, trying to wrap up the semester before the winter break.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for making some time. I know you have a lot going on here with us, and especially thank you for making some time to come out and see us in New Orleans next week. So that'll be really great to get to hang out with you again in person, like we did. I can't believe it was back in, March of this year.
Yeah.
We got to hang out here in Raleigh. Very fun times. So looking forward to getting back together in person. Thank you so much for everybody for joining us here tonight. We'll be back live Wednesday night after the episode to do it again. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.